What does every school kid from the 50s and 60s still remember? All these years later, you remember more than you think. You remember sounds, smells, and small rituals that nobody wrote down because everybody knew them. The bell, the chalk, the milk money, the games at recess, the teacher whose voice you can still hear if you close your eyes. This is a walk back through 100 of those memories, one at a time. From the classroom to the playground to the walk home. Some of them will make you smile. A few might put a lump in your throat. All of them belong to you once, and they still do. So settle in, because we are starting at number 100 and counting all the way down to the one memory that outlasted every other. Number 100, the morning school bell. It was not a chime or a tone from a speaker. It was a real bell, a heavy clang of metal on metal that rolled across the schoolyard and rattled the windows in their frames. You heard it from a block away, and your legs made the decision before your brain did. Boys grabbed their books off the fence rail. Girls quit their hopscotch mid-square. Everybody funneled toward the big double doors, because that bell meant the day had officially begun, and being on the wrong side of it meant a tardy mark in the teacher's book. In the 1950s, many schools still rang a bell mounted in a tower or bolted high on the brick, sometimes pulled by the janitor himself with a rope worn smooth by years of hands. The bell kept the whole neighborhood on time. Mothers set their kitchen clocks by it. Men walking to the plant checked their watches against it. The hard part was winter, when that bell dragged you out of a warm kitchen and into a cold coachroom that smelled of wet wool. The good part was the last bell of the afternoon. The same sound turned inside out, because at 3 o'clock it meant freedom. Today, a soft electronic tone does the job, and no child within a block feels it in their chest. You cannot set a clock by a beat. That old bell called you inside to a room full of desks that were nothing like the desks kids sit at now. Do you remember what was carved into yours? Number 99. Wooden desks bolted to the floor. Your desk was not furniture. It was architecture. Rows of dark wooden desks bolted to iron runners on the floor, each seat attached to the desk behind it. So the whole room was one connected machine of oak and cast iron. The wood was scarred with decades of initials, some of them carved by fathers and uncles who had sat in the very same row. The seat folded up with a bang if you stood too fast. The desktop lifted on a hinge, and inside lived your whole world, your tablet, your reader, your pencil box, and whatever treasure you had traded for at recess. Up in the right corner sat a round hole, the inkwell, a leftover from the days of dip pens that some schools still filled into the 1950s. Every class had a story about a girl's braid and the boy who sat behind her, and in some rooms the story was true. Those desks forced you to sit up. There was no slouching in a seat built at a right angle, and after 6 hours your back knew it. But there was something honest about furniture built to outlive you. Wood polished by generations of sleeves. Iron scrollwork on the sides like something off a courthouse gate. Today's desks are plastic and steel, light enough to rearrange in a minute, and forgettable the moment you leave the room. Nobody will find their grandfather's initials in one. And when the weather turned cold, everything you wore on the walk to school had to go somewhere. Do you remember the little room where it all hung dripping? Number 98, the cloakroom. Every classroom had one. A narrow room or a curtained alcove along the back wall, lined with iron hooks at kid height and a shelf up top for lunch boxes. The cloakroom smelled like nothing else on earth. Wet wool and rubber boots and banana sandwiches. All of it warmed by the radiator until the air went thick. In winter it was a swamp. Snow pants dripped onto the floorboards, mittens steamed on the pipes, and 30 coats packed shoulder to shoulder like the church coat rack on Christmas Eve. You learned to know your own coat by feel, because half the boys in class wore the same brown corduroy. The cloakroom was also the classroom's backstage. It was where the teacher took a boy for a talking to that everyone pretended not to hear. It was where notes got passed hand to hand at the end of the day, and where a certain kind of kid checked coat pockets that were not his own, which is why your mother sewed your milk money into a handkerchief. The downside was the crush at 3 o'clock, 30 children fighting into galoshes in a space built for 10. The upside was that the room held the whole class's life in one warm, damp, familiar smell. And some of you can still call up that smell right now. Modern schools went to hallway lockers and cubbies, and the cloakroom vanished along with the word itself. But the chalkboard at the front of that classroom left dust on everything, and cleaning it was a job kids actually fought for. Were you ever chosen to do it? Number 97. Clapping the erasers. Getting picked to clap the erasers was a promotion. At the end of the day, the teacher would choose 1 or 2 kids to carry the felt erasers outside, and you banged them together against the brick wall or against each other until white clouds rolled off and coated your hands, your sleeves, and if the wind turned, your whole face. You came back inside, dusted like a donut and proud of it. The job meant the teacher trusted you, and it bought you 5 unsupervised minutes in the schoolyard while everyone else sat through the last stretch of arithmetic. Some schools had a hand-cranked cleaning machine bolted in the basement, but most kids did it the honest way, whacking erasers on the fire escape until their palms stung. The chalk dust went everywhere. It settled into the chalk tray, drifted onto the teacher's dark dress, and hung in the afternoon light in slow golden clouds. Kids with asthma dreaded it, and mothers grumbled about white handprints on school trousers. But the ritual gave the day a clean ending. Boards washed, erasers clapped, chalk lined up in the tray for tomorrow. Whiteboards and markers ended all of it. There is no dust to clap out of a dry erase board, no job to be proud of, no cloud hanging in the 3 o'clock sun. The eraser kids also got first look at whatever the teacher was running off for tomorrow's lesson. Sheets that came off a machine with a smell no kid ever forgot. Do you remember pressing that paper to your face? Number 96. Mimeograph sheets and that purple ink. The teacher turned the crank, the drum spun, and out came the worksheets, damp, cool, and printed in a purple that existed nowhere else in nature. When a fresh stack landed on your desk, every kid in the row did the same thing without being told. You lifted the page to your nose and breathed in. That sweet, sharp smell of duplicating fluid is burned into an entire generation, and people who have not smelled it in 60 years can still summon it on command. The spirit duplicator, which most folks called the mimeograph whether it was one or not, was how a teacher multiplied herself. She typed or hand-cut a master sheet at night, clipped it to the drum, and cranked out 30 copies of the spelling test while the class watched the pages flop into the tray. Fresh copies smeared if you touched them too soon. And by June, the purple had faded to a ghost you could barely read. Cutting a new master was slow, fussy work, and one typing mistake meant scraping the wax with a razor blade. But the machine cost nothing to run compared to what came later, and it put a worksheet in every hand in a town that had never heard the word photocopy. Xerox machines killed the purple page by the 1970s, and the smell went with it. The sheets that mattered most, though, were not spelling tests. Some of them told you what to do when the siren blew. Do you remember what they taught you to do under your desk? Number 95. Duck and cover drills. The siren wailed, or the teacher said the 2 words and you dropped. Knees on the floorboards, body folded under your desk, hands laced over the back of your neck, face down, eyes shut. Duck and cover. If you were a school kid in the 1950s, you practiced this the way kids now practice fire drills. And a cartoon turtle named Bert taught you the moves in a civil defense film that ran in classrooms across the country. Some schools marched you into the hallway instead, rows of children kneeling against the tile wall like a strange kind of prayer. The teachers kept their voices calm and made it a game of who could tuck fastest, and most of you took it about as seriously as any drill, which is to say you peeked at your friends and tried not to giggle. It was only years later, thinking back, that the weight of it landed. The adults in that building were rehearsing you for the unthinkable, and doing it with steady hands and level voices, because that was the job. The drills gave families a feeling of doing something in years, when the news gave them plenty to fear. Whether a desk would have helped was a question nobody wanted answered. The drills faded through the 1960s, and kids today learn about them in history class with wide eyes. But every morning in that same classroom started with something steadier, everyone on their feet, facing the corner above the chalkboard. Do you remember what you said with your hand over your heart? Number 94. The Pledge of Allegiance every morning. Before a single lesson began, the whole room stood. Chairs scraped, feet shuffled into place, and 30 right hands went over 30 hearts as every face turned to the flag hanging on its wooden pole above the chalkboard. I pledge allegiance. You said it every school day for years, and the words wore a groove so deep that you could recite them today without 1 second of thought. Kids who started school in the early 1950s remember the change in 1954, when the words "under God" were added, and everyone had to relearn a rhythm they already knew by heart. In plenty of towns, the pledge came packaged with a patriotic song, "America the Beautiful" or "My Country 'Tis of Thee," sung flat and earnest by children still half asleep. In some communities, a morning prayer or a Bible verse came with it, a practice the Supreme Court ended in the early 1960s, a change that many families felt deeply. The morning ritual gave the day a spine. You started together, on your feet, saying the same words as every kid in every town in the country. The routine could turn to mumble, sure, and a first grader could spend a whole year saying invisible instead of indivisible, without anyone correcting him. But standing for something first thing in the morning shaped how that generation thought about the country they were growing up in. The pledge still exists, but the full morning ceremony, song and all, mostly does not. And once you sat down, there was a small matter of money knotted up somewhere on your person. Do you remember how you carried yours? Up somewhere on your person. Do you remember how you carried yours? Number 93, milk money. It was 3 cents in some towns, a nickel in others, and it traveled to school in whatever your mother trusted, knotted into the corner of a handkerchief, zipped into a plastic coin purse shaped like an orange slice, taped inside a mitten, or dropped in an envelope with your name penciled on the front. Milk money was the first money most kids ever managed, and losing it on the way to school was a small tragedy you might still remember the sting of. Every morning, the teacher collected it into a cigar box, counting coins and marking names in a ledger. Because a teacher in those days was also a bookkeeper, a nurse, and a bank. Some rooms had a milk monitor who did the collecting, a job that made a third grader feel like the First National Bank. The pennies bought you a half pint at milk time, and for a family scraping by, even those pennies took planning. Schools quietly covered the kids whose envelopes never came, and the teachers made sure nobody had to announce it. The system taught you early that money was real, that it could be lost through a hole in a pocket, and that your mother would ask what happened to it. Today, the money is a number in an online account, and no child feels coins warm in a mitt. But those pennies bought something that came in glass, cold and sweating in a wire crate by the door. Do you remember the sound those bottles made when the crate came in? Number 92. Glass milk bottles in the wire crate. Milk time meant the rattle and clink of glass. A metal crate of half-pint bottles hauled in from the hallway where the dairy truck had left it that morning. Each little bottle wore a cardboard cap you pried up with a fingernail, or a foil top you pushed in with your thumb. And in winter, the milk was so cold it made your teeth ache. In warm months, it was another story, because the crate sat wherever there was room, and a kid could draw a bottle that had gone warm and slightly sour, a taste some of you have never forgiven. The cream rose to the top in the days before homogenization reached every dairy, and the lucky kid shook his bottle or drank the plug of cream straight. Straws were paper and went soft before you finished. The milk came from a local dairy with its name printed right on the glass, and the empties went back in the crate, back on the truck, and back into service, a returnable system decades ahead of its time. Milk at school was seen as pure nourishment, bones and teeth and growing boys, and the half pint was the government's and the town's way of making sure every child got some. The warm milk days were the price. Waxed cartons took over through the 1960s, and the clink of glass left the classroom for good. Milk time done. It was back to work, and no work mattered more to your permanent record than what you did with a pencil between 2 blue lines. Do you remember the ovals? Number 91. Palmer Method penmanship drills. Page after page of ovals and push-pulls, round and round without lifting your pencil, arm moving from the shoulder the way the manual demanded. Penmanship was not a suggestion in the 1950s. It was a graded subject with its own line on your report card, and in thousands of schools, it was taught by the Palmer Method or something close to it. Drills designed to turn a child's scrawl into flowing, uniform script. The alphabet marched across a green strip above the chalkboard, capital letters and small, and you copied it until your hand cramped. The teacher walked the rows watching your grip, and left-handed kids remember the era with less warmth, because plenty of schools pushed them to switch hands or twisted their paper into strange angles to force a rightward slant. Ink came into it by the middle grades, cartridge pens in some rooms, and with ink came blots, smears, and the special misery of a smudged final copy that had to be done over. The reward was real. By 6th grade, most kids could produce handwriting their grandchildren now frame. Letters home from that generation looked like engravings. The cost was hours of drill and more than a few wrapped knuckles in the strictest rooms. Cursive barely survives in schools today, and a child may grow up unable to read his own grandmother's letters. Beautiful handwriting kept you out of trouble too, because trouble in those days had a very specific shape, and it hung on a wall in the principal's office. Do you remember what it was made of? Number 90. The paddle in the principal's office. Every kid knew it existed, even the ones who never saw it. The paddle hung on a hook or leaned in a corner of the principal's office. A flat board of varnished wood, sometimes with holes drilled through it, and its reputation did most of the work. Getting sent to the office was a walk every boy of that era can describe step by step. The long hallway, the secretary's look, the wait on the wooden bench outside the frosted glass door. Corporal punishment was legal and common in American schools through the 1950s and 1960s, and in many towns it came with a phone call home that guaranteed a second helping from your father. Coaches kept their own paddles. Some shop teachers made theirs. A few schools even let the paddle be signed by those who had met it, a strange badge of honor among the boys. The truth is that the threat kept most classrooms quiet, and plenty of men today will tell you it did them no harm and maybe some good. The other truth is that it fell hardest on certain kids again and again, and not always fairly, and there are men who carry that memory differently. Both things were true in the same building. Most states and districts moved away from it in the decades since, and the whole system of discipline changed shape. But the office was not the only punishment. Some sentences were served right at the chalkboard in front of everyone, one line at a time. Do you remember writing yours? Number 89. Writing lines on the blackboard. I will not talk in class. I will not talk in class. 50 times, sometimes 100 chalk squeaking while the janitor swept the hall, and your friends walked home without you. Writing lines was the standard sentence for the standard crimes. Talking, gum, passing notes, and it was served in public at the board, where anyone passing the doorway could read exactly what you had done. The punishment was boredom weaponized. Your arm ached by line 30. The chalk wore down to a stub that scraped your fingernail against the slate. Clever kids gripped 2 or 3 pieces of chalk at once to write multiple lines in one pass, and getting caught at it doubled the count. Teachers liked lines because the punishment fit inside the school day and required nothing but chalk, and because there was something fitting about making the crime itself into the sentence. The public part stung more than the writing. Standing at that board with your back to the room, you could feel every eye, and the girl you wanted to impress was one of them. Was it fair? Mostly. Was it effective? For a week or so. Detention halls and demerit systems took over in later years, and the image of a kid chalking his repentance across a blackboard now lives mostly in reruns and cartoons. The board had happier uses though. On the best afternoons, the lights went off, a machine hummed to life, and the wall became a movie screen. Do you remember the sound that told you to advance the frame? Number 88. The film strip projector and the beep. The teacher pulled the shades, flipped off the lights, and threaded a little roll of film into the projector, and the whole room settled into the dark like a theater. A film strip was not a movie. It was a series of still frames, and it came with a record or a tape that carried the narration. When the narrator finished a frame, a tone sounded, that flat electronic beep, and whichever lucky kid had been chosen to run the projector turned the knob to advance the frame. Being the projector kid was power. Turned too early and the class groaned. Missed the beep because you were whispering, and the teacher's flashlight found you. The film strips themselves covered everything. The water cycle, good manners, dental hygiene, the wonders of the postal system, all narrated in that confident mid-century announcer voice. The film got hot in the gate, and if it jammed, A frame could scorch and bubble on screen to the delight of every boy in the room. Film strips were cheap, which is why schools own hundreds, and they let a teacher in a small town show her class the pyramids. They were also, let us be honest, a nap in the dark for the back row. Videotape wiped them out by the 1980s, and the beep vanished from education forever. But the film strip was the junior version of something better. Once or twice a month, a bigger machine rolled in on a cart, and that meant a real movie. Do you remember the clatter of those reels? Number 87. Movie day and the 16mm projector. When the AV cart rolled through the door, the day was saved. The 16mm projector was a green or gray machine, the size of a suitcase, and it clattered like a sewing machine on a train. Threading it was an art. Film looped around rollers and sprockets in a path only the AV boy and the teacher fully understood. And when the leader counted down and the picture bloomed on the pull-down screen, the room cheered. Movie day meant science films with earnest narrators, nature films where something always got eaten, and around holidays, if the teacher was kind, a cartoon. The projector's hot bulb gave the room a smell of warm dust, and the film itself could snap mid-reel, flapping wildly, while the screen went white and the teacher scrambled for the switch. Splicing the break took real skill and a little roll of special tape. Schools shared these films through county libraries and film exchanges. So the same scratched print of a volcano documentary might visit every classroom in the district over a decade, pops and jump cuts included. The machine turned a Tuesday into an event, and that was its whole gift. It also let a generation see places and creatures no textbook photo could deliver. The price was fragility, burned frames, chewed sprockets, and the eternal wait while the teacher rewound. Video killed the clatter, and no screen since has earned a cheer just for turning on. When the lights came back up, the world was still hanging at the front of the room, rolled up on spring rollers like window shades. Do you remember the sound a map made when it snapped back up? Number 86. The pull-down maps above the chalkboard. They hung on rollers over the chalkboard like giant window shades, and when the teacher reached up with the pointer and pulled one down, geography unrolled with a soft rumble. The world map, the United States, sometimes the ancient world, all in muted 1950s colors, oceans in pale blue, countries in pink and yellow and green. The teacher's wooden pointer tapped its way across them, down the Mississippi, over the Rockies, across an Atlantic that took Columbus a whole chapter to cross. And every so often a map released too fast and snapped up with a crack like a gunshot, and the whole class jumped and then laughed, including, on a good day, the teacher. Those maps were snapshots of a world that kept changing under them. Kids of that era learned countries that no longer exist and borders that have since moved. And many schools could not afford new maps every time history redrew the lines. So you might learn geography a few years out of date and nobody thought twice. The maps made the world feel solid and knowable, something you could reach up and pull into the room. The pointer made every lesson feel a little like a briefing. The limit was obvious, a flat, fading picture standing in for a world in motion. Screens and satellite views replaced them, and something about the rumble and snap went missing. School issued the maps, but protecting your books was your job, and it started at the kitchen table with a paper sack and scissors. Table with a paper sack and scissors. Do you remember folding yours? Number 85. Book covers made from grocery bags. The textbooks belonged to the school, your name inked on a card inside the cover, under the names of every kid who had carried it before you, and heaven help you if it came back damaged. So the first homework of every year happened at the kitchen table. Your mother or father took a brown paper grocery sack, cut it open along the seam, and folded it around each book with creases sharp enough to shave with, tucking the flaps until the cover fit like a tailor made it. No tape on the book itself, that was the rule. By October, the brown paper was your canvas, doodles, initials, hearts with arrows, the name of a certain someone written small and then scribbled out. Some kids drew hot rods. Some played tic-tac-toe across algebra all semester. The covers cost nothing, which mattered in houses where nothing was wasted, and they worked. A book wrapped in craft paper survived a year of lockers, bike baskets, and being dropped in the snow. The skill passed from parent to child, like folding a flag. And there are people today who can still make those creases from pure muscle memory. Store-bought stretchy covers eventually took over, and the grocery sack version became a lost art along with the paper sack itself. Underneath that cover, though, the book was only half your kit. The rest of your supplies lived in a box that never held a single cigar. Do you remember where yours came from? Number 84. The cigar box full of school supplies. Before pencil pouches, there was the cigar box. Your father or your uncle or the man at the corner store handed one over. King Edward, White Owl, Dutch Masters. And it became your desk drawer treasure chest for the year. The wood or heavy cardboard smelled faintly of tobacco, no matter how long you owned it. A sweet, leathery smell that a whole generation associates with second grade. Inside went the essentials: pencils, a pink eraser, a small ruler, crayons, a bottle of paste, maybe a compass and a protractor by the upper grades. And then the personal cargo, a lucky marble, a rabbit's foot, a stick of gum you were saving, a folded note. The lid closed with a soft wooden click that was deeply satisfying, and some kids decorated theirs with decals or their initials in crayon. Cigar boxes were free, which was the entire point in an era when a family bought school supplies with change counted out at the 5 and dime. Stores gave the empties away, and a good sturdy one might serve 2 or 3 children in a row. The box turned a bolted-down desk into something that was yours. The only trouble came when a lid warped or a teacher decided the trading going on inside those boxes had gone too far. Plastic pencil cases pushed the cigar box out by the 1970s. But ask anyone from this era, and they can tell you exactly whose cigars their box once held. Inside that box lay your pencil, and under your arm rode the tablet you wrote on, with a chief in a war bonnet on the front. Do you remember its name? Number 83. The Big Chief tablet. Fat, red, and rough as a lumberyard. The Big Chief writing tablet was the first official school supply of millions of American childhoods. The cover carried the profile of an Indian chief in a full war bonnet, and inside weighted pages of soft, pulpy newsprint lined wide enough to park a truck between the rules. That paper was nothing fancy. It was pale gray, flecked with little bits of wood you could actually feel under your pencil, and it tore if your eraser lingered too long in one spot. Every kid learned that lesson the hard way, rubbing a mistake into a hole and then trying to write around the wound. The tablet cost a dime or so at the dime store, sat in a stack by the register every September, and for many families, it was the entire paper budget for a child's year. You practiced your letters on it, your numbers, your name over and over until it looked like the teacher's example. First stories got written on that gray paper, first spelling tests, first letters to Santa Claus, drafted at school and carried home for approval. The wide lines forgave a shaky 6-year-old hand, which was the whole design. The paper's weakness was also its charm, cheap enough that filling a page cost nothing, so you filled pages. The brand faded away decades later, and smooth white paper took over everything. But before you could write much of anything, you had to master the tool itself, and yours was twice the size of a normal pencil. Do you remember trying to hold it? Number 82. The Fat Beginner Pencil. First grade issued you a pencil the size of a broom handle. It was red or blue, thick as your father's thumb, and it had no eraser, which told you everything about what school expected. Mistakes were not anticipated. The fat pencil was designed for small hands still learning their grip, easier to hold, harder to snap, and it turned in the sharpener like a fence post. You wrapped your whole fist around it at first, and the teacher came down the row uncurling fingers one by one into the proper hold. Thumb here, pointer there, resting on the middle finger just so. The lead was soft and dark and wore down fast, and the writing it made was thick and waxy, and unmistakably first grade. Graduating to a regular yellow pencil, a number 2 with a real eraser, was a genuine rite of passage, usually somewhere in second grade, and kids counted the days. The skinny pencil meant you were a big kid now. It meant the school finally trusted you to make mistakes and fix them yourself. That eraser-less design carried a quiet philosophy. Do it slowly, do it carefully, do it right the first time, and whether or not that was fair to a 6-year-old. It left its mark on how that generation approached work for the rest of their lives. Fat beginner pencils still exist, but the ceremony around earning your way off of them mostly does not. Either way, every pencil in the room ended up at the same place sooner or later, a little machine bolted by the window with a crank on the side. Can you still hear it grinding? Number 81. The hand crank pencil sharpener by the window. It was bolted to the window sill or the door frame, a heavy metal Boston sharpener with a dial of different sized holes on the face, and a crank that ground with a sound the whole room knew by heart. Walking to the sharpener was the one legal way to stretch your legs during a lesson, and every kid milked it. You strolled, you gazed out the window, you cranked slowly, checked the point, found it wanting, and cranked some more, until the teacher's voice cut through with your name, and the word enough. The sharpener ate pencils. A brand new yellow number 2 could go in and come out half its length if you daydreamed, and the shavings drawer filled with curls of wood and graphite dust that some lucky kid got to empty into the waste basket. When the drawer came off wrong, shavings snowed onto the floor and the janitor had opinions. The machine itself was indestructible, cast metal, screwed down tight, the same unit serving that classroom for 20 or 30 years. There was a small social order to it too. The kid who sharpened 10 pencils before a test was stalling, and everyone knew it. Electric sharpeners and mechanical pencils eventually made the trip unnecessary, and classrooms lost their one sanctioned wander. The sharpener sat at the front of a supply list that also included the strangest jar in American education, one that came with a brush and a warning nobody obeyed. Do you remember the kid in your class who ate it? Number 80, the paste jar. School paste came in a squat white jar with a lid, and under that lid, on the better brands, a little plastic brush or paddle for spreading. The paste was thick white and smelled faintly of wintergreen, and that smell is the reason every class in America had at least one kid who ate it. You know his name. You can see his face right now. The paste was actually made from simple starch and flour and was not going to hurt anyone, which is probably why teachers responded with weary disgust instead of alarm. Paste was for art. Construction paper chains at Christmas, cotton ball snowmen, leaves traced in fall and pasted to the window glass. You slathered it with the brush or your finger, pressed the paper down, and learned that too much paste made everything buckle and wave like a washboard. It dried on your hands into a crackly second skin you peeled off during story time, deeply satisfying and completely against the rules. The jars sat on the supply shelf all year, and by spring the paste in a neglected jar went hard as plaster around the edges. It was cheap, it was safe, and it held a paper chain together just fine. What it could not do was hold anything heavier, which is where its amber-colored cousin came in. A bottle with a red rubber cap that oozed when you pressed it to paper. Do you remember the smell of that one? Number 79. The mucilage bottle with the rubber top. The other glue on the shelf was mucilage, an amber liquid in a curvy glass or plastic bottle wearing a red rubber cap with a slit in the top. You tipped it upside down, pressed the rubber against your paper and dragged, and the slit was supposed to feed out a thin, even line of glue. Supposed to. In practice, the cap clogged, then unclogged all at once, delivering a flood that soaked through construction paper and glued your project to the desk. The rubber top got gummy and picked up paper fuzz, and picking it clean was its own little classroom hobby. Mucilage smelled sharp and plant-like, nothing like the wintergreen paste, and it dried shiny and slightly brittle. It came from plant gums, the same family of stickum that lived on the back of postage stamps and envelope flaps, which is why licking an envelope tasted vaguely like art class. Teachers assigned it for anything paste could not handle, and the bottle lasted forever because so little came out on purpose. The genius of the design was that it needed no brush and no mess in theory. The reality was orange fingerprints on everything you owned. White glue in the squeeze bottle, Elmer's with the bull on the label, marched in during the era and eventually took the whole territory. The supply shelf held one more box, though, and this one was pure joy, 64 colors deep with a sharpener built right into the back. Do you remember opening yours for the first time? Number 78. The Crayola 64 box with the built-in sharpener. It arrived in 1958, And for kids of that era, it was the single most glamorous object a desk could hold. 64 crayons standing in tiered rows like a choir, and in the back of the box, pressed into the cardboard, a little sharpener that could bring a worn crayon back to a point. Opening a new box was an event. The colors stood untouched, paper wrappers crisp, points perfect, and the smell rolled out. That waxy Crayola smell that researchers have found to be one of the most recognized scents in America. Most kids carried the 8 box or the 24, so the kid with the 64 held real status. And the colors inside had names that felt like poetry: periwinkle burnt sienna, carnation pink, midnight blue. You learned diplomacy over that box. Lending your black, which everyone wore down first, was friendship. Refusing to lend was war. The agony of the box was the first broken crayon, usually the fault of a heavy-handed neighbor, and the sharpener shavings that worked their way into the bottom of the box and stained everything. A big box of crayons was not cheap for every family, and plenty of kids colored beautifully all year from a box of 8, which is its own quiet lesson. Crayons endure, but that particular hierarchy of the 64 box ruled classrooms for a generation. The coloring happened around the real work, of course, and the real work started with 2 children and a dog, whose names your whole generation learned to read on. Do you remember them? Number 77. Dick and Jane. See Dick run. Run, Dick, run. If you learned to read in the 1950s, odds are you learned it from Dick, Jane, their little sister Sally, Spot the dog, and Puff the cat, in readers built on repetition and a small, carefully rationed vocabulary. The books were bright and orderly. A world of green lawns, station wagons, and a father in a hat. And the sentences marched in place until the words sank in. Look, look, oh look. Millions of American children learned to read this way, in reading circles where you sat on little chairs and took turns aloud while the teacher listened for stumbles. The method had its critics even then. In 1955, a book called Why Johnny Can't Read attacked the whole Luxay approach and argued for phonics. And the argument over how to teach reading has never really ended. But whatever the method's flaws, the memory holds. You remember the feel of the reader in your hands, the smell of the pages, the pride of moving up from one book to the next, and the particular agony of reading aloud when you hit a word you did not know while the room waited. Dick and Jane's tidy world matched some children's lives and looked nothing like others, and the publishers only began adding families of color in the mid-1960s. Late in the series' life, the readers faded out by the 1970s. Reading class had a companion, though, a little newspaper written just for kids that landed on your desk every week. Do you remember its name? Number 76, My Weekly Reader. Once a week, the teacher passed down the rows, a small newspaper printed just for children, and for many kids, My Weekly Reader was the first news they ever read. It shrank the grown-up world down to classroom size. A story about the space program, a new dam, a president's trip, written in short sentences with photographs, and a puzzle or a joke tucked in the back. Kids of the late 1950s and 1960s read about satellites and astronauts in its pages, while the space race unfolded in real time, and the paper made you feel included in it, as if the country had thought to send you, personally, the news. The teacher built lessons around it, current events on Friday, and some kids stood up and reported on their article like tiny anchormen. The subscription cost a little, collected from families or covered by the school, and the paper had been at it since 1928, so your parents may have read it too. Its worldview was sunny and confident, progress on every page, which was both its charm and its blind spot. Not much ink went to the harder news of the era, and the editors chose carefully what a fourth grader should carry home. Still, it planted the habit of reading about the world beyond your town. The paper hung on for decades before folding into another publication in 2012, and it was not the only thing passed down the rows. Once a month came a thin order form that turned into books if you played it right. Do you remember circling your choices? Number 75. Scholastic Book Orders. The teacher handed out a thin newsprint flyer, and for one night your kitchen table became a bookstore. The Scholastic Book Club flyer listed paperbacks for pocket change, a quarter here, 35 cents there, and you circled your hopes in pencil and made your case to your mother while she counted what the week could spare. Maybe one book, on a good week too. You sealed the coins in the envelope, printed your name, and handed it in. And then came the waiting, which was the best part and the worst part. Weeks later, a cardboard box arrived at the classroom, and the teacher called names while she pulled out the stacks. And when your name came, a brand new book slid onto your desk with its cover slick and its spine uncracked. For kids in homes without many books, and there were plenty, that flyer was a doorway. Scholastic had been running book clubs since the late 1940s, and by the 1960s, their cheap paperbacks were putting biographies, mysteries, and animal stories into millions of small hands. The books were flimsy, sure glue spines that let pages go loose by the third reading. Nobody cared. The book was yours, bought with your family's money, with your name written inside the cover. Some of you still own one. Classrooms today still get the flyers, though the prices would stagger your mother. And when the classroom's own shelf ran thin, reading class turned to a box of color-coded cards. That let you race against yourself. Do you remember what color you reached? Number 74, the SRA reading box. At the front of the room sat a long cardboard box filled with cards, and inside that box lived your reading future. The SRA Reading Laboratory sorted stories onto color-coded cards, each color a level, and you worked through them at your own speed, reading the card, answering the questions, checking your own answers, and climbing the ladder one color at a time. Science Research Associates introduced the kits in the late 1950s, and they spread through American classrooms fast because they solved a real problem. One teacher, 30 kids, and 30 different reading speeds. The genius was that the box made reading a race you ran against yourself. Everybody knew the color order, and everybody knew where everybody else stood, which was the system's blessing and its curse. Moving up a color felt like a promotion, and kids who might have yawned through a reader attacked those cards like a contest. But the kids stuck in the low colors wore that too, in full view. And some of you remember which side of that you were on. The stories themselves were short and workmanlike. Adventure pieces, science bits, a comprehension quiz on the back, laminated cards gone soft at the corners from 100 hands. Self-checking taught honesty, or at least offered the chance to learn it. Versions of the SRA box survived for decades, and people still trade memories of the color they finished on. Reading had its box, and arithmetic had its own weapon. A stack of cards the teacher flashed at you while your heart pounded. Do you remember standing up for it? Number 73. Arithmetic flash cards. The teacher stood at the front with a deck of cards, each one printed with a fact. 7 times 8, 9 plus 6, 12 minus 5. And she flashed them one at a time while the class answered together, or worse, while you answered alone. Flashcard drills were daily bred in the 1950s classroom, sometimes run as a game where two kids stood side by side, and the first correct answer moved you down the row. They called it around the world in a lot of rooms, and winning it meant something on the playground afterward. The cards were plain manila with fat black numerals, worn soft at the corners, and the good teachers kept the pace brisk, so the whole room stayed on its toes. At home, mothers cut their own sets from cardboard and ran you through them at the kitchen table while supper cooked, because arithmetic facts were considered a family responsibility, not just a school one. The drilling worked. People from this era can still fire back a times fact in half a second at 75 years old. No calculator, no hesitation, and they use it every week at the grocery store. The cost was sweat. A slow kid in a fast drill felt every eye in the room, and arithmetic anxiety got planted in some hearts right there. Calculators and new methods softened all of it in later decades. But the cards were only half the drill. The other half was pure voice, the whole class chanting together in a rhythm you can still hear. Do you remember how it went? Number 72. Reciting the times tables out loud. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. The whole class in unison, sing song, up one table and down the next, day after day, until the facts were welded in. Reciting the times tables was how arithmetic got learned in the 1950s, by voice and rhythm, the same way children have memorized things since before paper. The room chanted together, then rows chanted, then you stood by your desk alone and ran a table start to finish, while the teacher listened with her grade book open. The 9s were the mountain, the 7s were the swamp, and somewhere in every school lived a famous kid who could do the 12s backward. Standing to recite put a knot in your stomach, but the chant carried you because the rhythm itself held the answers. And if you lost your place, you could feel your way back by the beat. Mothers drilled it at home. Fathers quizzed it at supper, usually right when your mouth was full. The method gets called rote learning now, said with a wrinkled nose, and it is true that chanting does not teach why 7/8 make 56, but it teaches that they do permanently, and that generation carries its multiplication to the grave, while their grandchildren reach for a phone to tip a waitress. Once a week, the same standing-up nervousness came with letters instead of numbers. Whole words spelled aloud one letter at a time while the room went quiet. Do you remember the word that finally sat you down? Number 71, the spelling bee. Friday afternoon, the books closed, and 2 lines formed along the walls. The spelling bee was the classroom's gladiator match, polite, orderly, and without 1 ounce of mercy. The teacher read the word, used it in a sentence, and read it again, and you stood there with every eye on you, spelling into the silence 1 letter at a time. Say the word first, spell it, say it again. Miss a letter, and you heard the small, terrible sound of the teacher's pause, and then you walked back to your desk, while the word passed to the next kid in line, who suddenly loved that word very much. The last 2 spellers standing dueled while the class picked sides, and the winner might get a gold star, a certificate, or nothing but glory, which was plenty. Good spellers lived for Fridays. Kids who struggled dreaded them with a dread you could measure, because the bee did its judging in public, and there was no partial credit and nowhere to hide. Schools fed their champions upward, to county bees and beyond, and the national bee had been crowning champions since 1925. So the dream had a real ladder. Spelling mattered in that world. Letters, applications, and signs got written by hand, and a misspelled word cost you credibility everywhere you carried it. Bees still exist, but the weekly classroom version faded as spelling itself lost its throne. The other Friday ritual happened at the chalkboard with a piece of chalk and a sentence to take apart. Do you remember drawing the lines? Number 70, diagramming sentences. The teacher wrote a sentence on the board, handed you the chalk, and you took it apart like an engine. A horizontal line for subject and verb, a vertical stroke between them, slanted lines hanging below for the modifiers, and if the sentence had a prepositional phrase, a little shelf swung down to hold it. Diagramming sentences was grammar made visible, and in the 1950s and 1960s it was serious business, drilled from grade school into high school. Some kids hated it with their whole hearts. Some kids, and you know who you are, loved it, the way other kids loved jigsaw puzzles, because a diagram either worked or it did not, and when the last word found its slot, the sentence clicked shut like a well-made drawer. The method went back to the 1870s. 2 professors named Reed and Kellogg, and it survived nearly a century in American classrooms because it forced you to know what every single word was doing. You could not diagram a sentence you did not understand. Compound sentences grew wings. A long one from a real book could sprawl across the whole board like a family tree, and finishing it felt like landing a plane. The complaints were fair. It was slow, it was fussy, and plenty of fine writers never diagrammed a thing. Schools dropped it almost everywhere by the 1970s, but people who learned it never quite stopped seeing the scaffolding under English. All of that work, the spelling, the tables, the diagrams, got weighed 4 times a year and sent home in an envelope. Do you remember the walk? Number 69, carrying the report card home. 4 times a year, the teacher passed out manila envelopes, and the walk home got longer. The report card was a folded piece of card stock with your subjects down one side and your marks down the other. Letters in some towns, numbers in others, plus the categories that could sink you at home no matter how the arithmetic went. Conduct, effort, and the killer, whispers in class. There was no email, no parent portal, no advance warning. You carried the news yourself, and your parents knew the schedule, so losing it in a storm drain was not a plan, though every kid considered it. At the kitchen table, your father read it top to bottom, while you studied the linoleum. A good card might earn a quarter, a handshake, or supper with your name in it. A bad one earned the talk, and in some houses more than a talk, Then came the part kids today would not believe. Your parents signed the card, and you carried it back, because the school required proof the news had landed. Teachers wrote comments in fountain pen, "A fine worker" or "talks too much." 3 words that followed some of you for years. The system was blunt, and it could be crushing for a kid who struggled, but it also made a child answer for his own record, face to face, twice over. Some efforts got recognized with a different piece of paper, one you earned just by showing up every single day. Did you ever win it? Number 68, the perfect attendance certificate. At the end of the year, when the awards were handed out, one certificate honored something that had nothing to do with brains. Perfect attendance. Every day all year, present and accounted for. And your name went on a certificate with a gold seal, sometimes a small pin to go with it. In the 1950s, this was a serious honor, and families treated it that way, because showing up was the whole creed of that generation. Fathers who never missed a shift at the plant raised children who never missed a day of school, and the certificate proved the raising took. Kids dragged themselves in with colds that would keep a modern child home a week, sniffling through arithmetic because the streak mattered, and mothers weighed a fever against a gold seal, in a calculation nobody would recommend now. Whole years turned on luck. One case of measles in February, and the certificate was gone, which stung worse because measles was everywhere in the day before the vaccine arrived in 1963. The award said something true, that steadiness is a virtue, and habits are built one morning at a time. It also, let us admit, put a medal on coming to school contagious, and every parent of that era who nursed a whole family through a bug the street keeper brought home knows it. Schools have cooled on the award since. Getting to school, every one of those days meant crossing streets, and at the big crossings stood a kid your own age wearing a white belt and a silver badge. Do you remember who guarded your corner? Number 67, the safety patrol. At the crosswalks around every school stood the safety patrol, 5th and 6th graders wearing a white webbed belt that crossed the chest and clipped at the hip, a silver badge pinned to it, and an expression of maximum seriousness. They held out their arms to stop a line of 1st graders, walked them across, and waved them on, and they took the job the way a rookie cop takes his first beat. Getting picked for patrol was a genuine honor. Teachers chose kids they trusted, and the belt meant the school had decided you were somebody worth minding. Patrol members showed up early in every kind of weather, stood their corner in rain with the belt over a slicker, and bossed their own classmates with the full backing of the law, which was the sweetest part of the deal. The AAA had been sponsoring school safety patrol since the 1920s, and by the 1950s, millions of kids had worn the belt, some with white lieutenant and captain hardware for the ambitious. The program worked because kids listened to kids, and because it dressed responsibility up in just enough uniform to make it glamorous. The downside was standing on a frozen corner at 8 in the morning, while your friends walked past warm and free. Patrols still exist here and there, though adult crossing guards took over most corners. The patrol mattered because nearly everybody came on foot, rain or shine, sometimes a mile or more. Do you remember your route? Number 66. Walking to school in every kind of weather. You walked 6 blocks, 10 blocks, a mile more, and you walked it twice a day in sun, rain, sleet, and snow deep enough to wet your socks through the galoshes. Nobody drove you. In most families, the one car left with your father at 7, and the school bus was for farm kids and the far edges of the district. So the sidewalks filled every morning with children moving in loose flocks, picking up friends house by house like a train, taking on passengers. And the route home ran past every distraction a kid could want. The creek, the vacant lot, the candy store. The walk was where the real business of childhood got done. Alliances formed, arguments settled, first crushes walked past a certain house twice for no reason anyone would admit. You learned the neighborhood the way a mailman knows it, which dog was all bark, which fence could be climbed, whose mother watched from behind which curtain. And that last part mattered, because every mother on the route had authority over every kid on it, and news of misbehavior beat you home. The freedom was real, and so was the weather. There were mornings your ears burned with cold and afternoons you got soaked to the skin, and you lived. Today most children ride, and the sidewalks at 8 a.m. stand mostly empty. but a few mornings each winter. If the snow came down hard enough, the walk got called off entirely, and the news arrived through a radio speaker in the kitchen. Do you remember waiting for your school's name? Number 65. Snow day announcements on the radio. The snow fell all night, and by 6:30 the kitchen radio was on, and nobody was allowed to talk. The local announcer read the school closings alphabetically, in no hurry at all, and you stood there in your pajamas living and dying by every name that was not yours. There was no website, no phone alert. There was one man's voice, one list, and if you missed your school's name, you waited through the whole cycle again, while your mother packed your lunch just in case. And then it came, your district closed and the kitchen erupted. A snow day in the 1950s was pure found money. Sleds came off nails in the garage. Snow pants went on over pajamas, and the whole neighborhood poured onto the best hill in town. Wooden flexible flyers with steel runners waxed on the kitchen stove. You stayed out until you could not feel your feet, came in to dry mittens on the radiator, drank cocoa made from real milk in a pan, and went back out. The radio ritual had its cruelty, too. The morning the list ran long, and your name never came, and you trudged to school through the same snow that had freed the next town over. Nobody has to huddle around a radio anymore. The phone buzzes at 5 a.m. and the drama is gone. On the ordinary mornings, though, you carried your dinner with you, and what you carried it in said everything about you. Did you remember what was painted on yours? Number 64. The metal lunch box and the thermos inside. Your lunch box was your billboard. Stamped steel, painted with cowboys or spacemen or cartoon dogs, with a swinging handle, and two clasps that snapped shut like a car trunk. Roy Rogers, Hopalong Cassidy, the Lone Ranger, later the astronauts and the TV families. Whatever rode on your lunch box told the playground who you were. Inside, held by a wire clip in the lid, waited the real treasure, the thermos bottle. And inside the thermos, a lining of silvered glass kept your milk cold or your soup hot clear until noon. That glass was also the tragedy waiting in every lunch box. Drop it once on the blacktop and you heard the sound, a soft crushed rattle, and lunchtime revealed milk full of glitter that went straight in the trash while you mourned. Mothers packed those boxes at 6 in the morning. A sandwich in wax paper folded with hospital corners, an apple, maybe 2 cookies if the tin allowed. And the smell inside every steel box was the same everywhere in America: bologna, banana, and warm metal. The boxes dented, rusted at the hinges, and got swung at siblings, which is why some schools frowned on them. Plaid ones served the kids, whose heroes had been outvoted at the store. Plastic replaced steel in the 1970s. And the originals now sell to collectors for real money. Whatever you carried, it ended up in a cafeteria run by women in hairnets who knew every child by name. Do you remember what they called you? Number 63. The cafeteria ladies. They wore hairnets and white uniforms, and they ran the lunchroom like a well-drilled kitchen brigade, because that is what they were. The cafeteria ladies of the 1950s and 1960s actually cooked, from scratch, in vats and ovens big enough to climb into. Yeast rolls rising by the hundred, government cheese melted into macaroni, soup built from bones, and sheet cakes frosted right there in the back. The smell of those rolls baking drifted into classrooms by 10 in the morning and made the last hour before lunch a form of torture. The ladies knew the kids. They knew which boy was growing 3 inches a year and slid him a bigger scoop. And they knew which child came from a house where supper was thin, and that child's tray got quietly favored. No announcement, no fuss. Many of them were mothers and grandmothers from the same neighborhood, working school hours so they could be home when their own kids were. And they took the feeding of children personally. They also enforced the law. You took what you took, you sat where you sat, and you did not waste, because the clean plate rule had survived the Depression intact. Some of the food was gray. Let us be honest, and canned spinach broke harder kids than the paddle did. But the rolls were legend, and people spend to this day trying to find that cafeteria roll recipe. Trays line up under warmers now, and scratch cooking mostly left the building. The tray itself, though, deserves its own memory. Do you remember the sound it made hitting the rails? Number 62. The compartment lunch tray. The tray came first, then the food. Stamped steel or heavy melamine divided into compartments. A big well for the main, smaller wells for the vegetable, the fruit, the roll, and a round socket where the milk carton or bottle sat. You slid it down 3 rails of steel tubing, past the serving line, while the ladies loaded each compartment with one practiced motion. Plop, plop, roll. And the sound of 100 trays hitting those rails was the sound of noon itself. The compartments existed for a reason. Your grandmother would salute, order and portion every food in its place. No juice from the peaches touching the meatloaf, unless the tray tilted, and every kid got the same measured serving, which settled arguments before they started. Carrying a loaded tray was a skill first graders learned by disaster. Somebody dropped one every week. The crash silenced the whole room for 1 beat, and then came the applause, that merciless cafeteria ovation that followed every dropped tray in America. At the end of lunch, you scraped your tray at the window, stacked it, and the ladies washed the same trays for 20 years, because nothing about them wore out. Divided foam and paper crept in later, built to throw away, which would have struck the 1950s as madness. The trays carried some meals worth remembering, and a few worth forgetting, and one of them showed up every single Friday without fail. Do you remember why? Number 61. Fish sticks every Friday. You did not need a calendar in the cafeteria. If the trays came down the line loaded with fish sticks, it was Friday. Breaded, baked to a uniform gold, lined up in the big compartment beside a scoop of macaroni and a spoonful of peas, with a paper cup of tartar sauce if your school was fancy. The Friday fish tradition ran on 2 engines. Catholic families abstained from meat on Fridays in those years, and public schools with heavy Catholic enrollment made Friday Fish Day for everybody rather than run 2 menus. At the same time, the frozen fish stick itself was brand new, introduced in the early 1950s when flash freezing and factory breading turned ocean fish into a uniform bar a school kitchen could bake by the thousand. For a lot of inland kids, fish sticks were the first fish they ever ate, and for better or worse they formed the whole idea of it. The sticks were mild, crunchy at the corners, mushy in the middle if the batch ran late, and they divided the lunchroom into loyalists and traitors. The loyalists dragged them through ketchup and asked for seconds. The traitors swapped them for anything, a roll, a fruit cup, a promise. When the church eased the year-round Friday rule in 1966, the tradition loosened, but plenty of cafeterias kept the habit for decades out of pure momentum. Trading, of course, was the real economy of the lunch table, and it had rules and exchange rates all its own. Do you remember what your mother packed that you could never move? Number 60, trading lunches. The wax paper came off and the market opened. Lunch trading was the first economy most kids ever worked, and it ran on hard exchange rates everyone understood. A Hostess cupcake was gold and could command anything on the table. Homemade cookies traded strong. A bologna sandwich moved at par against peanut butter and jelly. And at the bottom sat the unmovables, the liverwurst, the sardine sandwich, the hard-boiled egg that announced itself the moment the lid opened. Goods a kid could not give away, with a nickel taped to them. You learned to read a market, to bundle a weak sandwich with a strong cookie, to hold your apple until the right moment, to spot the kid whose mother baked on Thursdays. Some mothers packed with the market in mind, and some packed exactly what they packed and you ate it or traded at a loss. There was kindness threaded through it too. The kid whose lunch was thin, a plain bread and butter sandwich and nothing else, tended to find half a sandwich sliding across the table without a word, because kids see more than adults think, and that generation was raised to share without making a show of it. Teachers officially discouraged trading and unofficially ignored it. Schools today ban it outright over allergies, and the lunch table lost its stock exchange. One item never traded at all, because on the days it appeared, every kid already had one, a little cup with a flat wooden spoon. Do you remember peeling that lid? Number 59. Dixie cups with the wooden spoon. On the best cafeteria days at the end of the line, a freezer chest held the little cups. Dixie cups of ice cream, half vanilla and half chocolate, laid side by side under a round cardboard lid with a pull tab, and taped to the top or handed alongside. A flat wooden spoon shaped like a tiny paddle. You peeled the lid and licked it. Everybody licked the lid. It was practically the law. And then you went at the ice cream with that wooden spoon, which bent slightly, held nothing efficiently, and left a taste of popsicle stick wood in every bite that somehow belonged there. The ice cream itself was ordinary, but the occasion never was, because the cups came out for parties, for the last day before Christmas break, for field day, or on regular days for a few cents extra that not every kid had. In some eras and towns, the underside of that lid carried a picture, movie stars in the early days, later animals and sports, and kids collected the lids, wiping them on their trousers and trading them like cards. Half a class saved wooden spoons in cigar boxes for no reason any adult could name. The cups were small by any modern measure, a few honest spoonfuls, and no one felt cheated, which tells you something about the size of treats back then. Plastic spoons and giant portions replaced all of it, but the little cup earned its place at every school party. And out on the playground, the real business of childhood waited in a circle drawn in the dirt. Did you play for keeps? Number 58. Marbles at recess. A circle scratched into the dirt, a fist full of glass, and a question that could end a friendship. For keeps or for fair? Marbles was the serious game of the 1950s playground, played on knees in the dust with a vocabulary all its own. Your shooter was your prize marble, bigger than the rest, and you fired it with a thumb flick from a cocked fist. Knuckles down if you played honest. No hunching over the line unless you wanted the whole circle on you. Cat's eyes, Aggies, Steelies rolled from ball bearings, Purries clear as creek water. Each kind had a value every kid could quote like a broker. Playing for keeps meant every marble you knocked from the ring became yours for good, and fortunes changed hands at recess. Whole drawstring bags won and lost before the bell. Some schools banned keeps as gambling, which it was in every way that counted, and the games moved behind the backstop. A good shooter's thumb grew, a callus he showed off like a medal. The marbles came from the dime store a bag at a time, or got inherited from older brothers, and a boy's collection lived in a cloth sack or a mason jar he could weigh in his hand in the dark and know by heart. The game rewarded a steady hand and a cool head, and losing your best Aggie for keeps taught you about risk faster than any lecture. Marbles faded from playgrounds within a generation. The girls, meanwhile, ruled a different patch of pavement with a small rubber ball and 10 metal stars. Do you remember how high the game could go? Number 57. Jacks on the sidewalk. 10 little 6-pointed metal stars, 1 small rubber ball, and a square of smooth concrete. That was the whole kit, and it fit in a drawstring bag or a coat pocket. Jacks was played crouched or cross-legged on the sidewalk or the school steps, and it demanded a hand quicker than most grown men could manage. You tossed the ball up, swept up your jacks, and caught the ball on one bounce. Onesies first, then twosies, up the ladder to the impossible tens, where all 10 jacks had to come up in a single grab before that ball came down. The good players had moves with names, pigs in the pen, around the world no bouncies, and house rules varied block by block, which meant every game started with negotiations. Mostly the girls ran the jack scene, fingers flying, ponytails bobbing, settling turns with a rhyme, while the boys pretended not to be impressed and were anyway. The jacks themselves were cast metal with real points, and every family learned what it felt like to step on one barefoot, a lesson delivered at full volume. A set cost next to nothing at the dime store, lasted years, and sharpened reflexes better than any gadget since. The game asked for patience too, because you sat out and watched while your rival climbed the ladder, and you learned to lose without kicking the jacks into the grass. Mostly, a few squares over on the same pavement, another game was chalked out in numbered boxes, and it ran on one good hopping leg. Do you remember tossing your marker? Number 56. Hopscotch. Somebody's chalk drew the court before the first bell, numbered squares up the sidewalk. Single, single, double, single, double, with a big rounded box at the top for home or sky. You found your marker, a flat stone, a bottle cap, a bean pod, the heel of somebody's old shoe if times were tight, and you tossed it into square one. Then came the hopping, 1 foot in the singles, both feet splitting the doubles, over the square that held your marker up and back. Bending on one leg, to pick the marker up without touching a line or losing your balance. Touch a line, you were out. Wobble and put a hand down, out. The game looks simple until you are standing on one leg in square 7 with your ankle burning and the whole line watching. Hopscotch is old beyond memory. Kids have played versions of it for centuries, and the 1950s schoolyard inherited it whole. Mostly a girls' game by custom, with the best players hopping in dress shoes because girls wore dresses to school and played anyway. The court cost 1 piece of chalk, refreshed after every rain, and by June the pavement in front of most schools wore a season's worth of ghost courts fading over each other. The game built balance and patience, and gave the smallest kid a fair shot at the tallest. Rain always won in the end. Nearby, 2 ropes were already turning, and the girls waiting in line were chanting rhymes you can still recite. Do you remember jumping in? Number 55. Jump rope rhymes and double dutch. The ropes slapped the pavement in rhythm, and the rhymes told you when to jump. Cinderella, dressed in yellow, went upstairs to kiss a fella. Teddy bear, turn around. 2 girls turned the ends while the line waited, and jumping in was an act of timing and nerve, reading the arc, rocking on your toes, then in, feet finding the beat while the whole sidewalk counted. Miss, and you took an end, because turning was the tax you paid for jumping. The rhymes were the playground's oral literature, passed girl to girl for generations, counting rhymes that told your fortune, how many kisses, what letter he starts with, the rope keeping score. And then there was double dutch, 2 ropes turning opposite ways in a blur, which took the game to another level entirely. Double dutch flourished on city sidewalks, and black girls in the big cities raised it to an art, footwork and speed, and turns inside the ropes that stopped grown men on the street to watch. A clothesline worked when no store rope was handy, because this game required nothing but rope, rhythm, and nerve. The turners mattered as much as the jumper, steady wrists, even tempo, and a bad turner heard about it. Feet caught, ankles stung, and you got up and got back in line. The rhymes are still out there, though the sidewalks are quieter now. The rough games belong to a different corner of the yard, where 2 lines of kids faced off holding hands and hollering a dare. Do you remember hearing your name called? Number 54. Red Rover. 2 lines of kids faced each other across the grass, hands clasped down the row, and the chant went up, Red Rover, send Jimmy right over. And Jimmy came, head down, legs pumping, aiming for the weakest pair of hands in your line, and the whole game hung on the half-second, where a running kid met 2 locked wrists. Break through and you carried a prisoner back to your side. Bounce off, and you joined the chain that caught you. Red Rover was simple, loud, and rough, and it was played at every school in the country by kids in school shoes on grass and gravel alike. Strategy was real. You called over the fast kid before he got dangerous. You hid your weak links in the middle, and you learned exactly which classmates lowered their hands at the last second, and which ones took the hit like a fence post. Wrists got wrenched. Kids went down hard, sometimes 2 and 3 at a time, and clothesline was not a figure of speech. Everybody got up mostly, and the game rolled on until the bell, because the teachers watching from the steps had played it themselves and considered a skinned elbow part of the curriculum. Schools began banning it in later decades, and the reasons are not mysterious. But there was something in that game. The moment your small hands held against a big kid's charge and your whole line cheered, that no supervised activity ever replaced. The other great recess battle was fought with a red rubber ball and no mercy at all. Were you a dodger or a thrower? Number 53. Dodgeball. 1 red rubber playground ball, pebbled and slightly overinflated, and a gym full of kids sorted instantly into hunters and hunted. Dodgeball ran at recess and in gym class both, sometimes as 2 teams across a center line, sometimes as a circle firing inward at the kids trapped in the middle. The ball made a sound when it hit, a deep rubber whump, and it left a stinging red badge on bare skin that you wore the rest of the day. The rules were argued more than followed. Catch the ball and the thrower was out, everybody agreed. Headshots were illegal mostly, unless nobody saw. And the last kid standing, dodging 3 balls at once while both teams screamed, got a moment of glory that some men still rank among their finest. The game had a food chain, and everybody knew their place on it. The big throwers picked off the slow kids early, and being the first one out week after week planted something in a few hearts that never fully left. That is the honest ledger of dodgeball, thrilling for many, miserable for some, and gym teachers of the era saw it as toughening, which was the reigning philosophy of the age. The red ball itself served every game the blacktop knew. Kickball, 4 square wall ball, 1 ball for all seasons. Many schools have since banned dodgeball outright, which strikes the survivors as either progress or softness, depending on who you ask. Off in the corner of the yard, a quieter duel spun around a steel pole on a rope. Do you remember the sting of that yellow ball? Number 52. Tetherball. A steel pole set in concrete, a yellow ball on a rope, and 2 kids circling each other like prize fighters. Tetherball was the playground's dueling ground. 1 against 1, winner stays on, and the line of challengers leaning on the fence kept the stakes honest. You served by smacking the ball around the pole, and your opponent fought it back the other way, the rope wrapping and unwrapping, the ball whipping past ears, until one of you wound it tight to the top, and the pole gave its little shudder of victory. The strategy was simple and brutal. Tall kids hit over, short kids hit under and prayed, and every school had one player, sometimes a quiet girl nobody expected, who owned that pole for a whole year, and sent challengers back to the fence rubbing their forearms. Because the forearms took the damage, the ball came off the rope hard, and blocking it wrong stung like a paddle, and jammed fingers were the price of a careless volley. Playing at recess in school clothes meant girls played in dresses and boys in stiff shoes, and nobody thought a thing of it. The pole stood on asphalt, of course, like everything else out there, and falling was your own business. Tetherball asked for timing, nerve, and a short memory for pain, and it gave back the purest one-on-one contest childhood offered. The poles have thinned out over the decades, many standing empty where the balls were never replaced. Towering over the whole yard, though, was the ride that separated the brave from the careful, and it was made of hot metal. Do you remember the climb? Number 51. The tall metal slide. It stood over the playground like a water tower, a ladder of steel, rungs climbing to a platform higher than your father's head, and a long ramp of polished sheet metal aimed at a patch of packed dirt. The tall slide was the mountain of the schoolyard, and climbing it the first time took everything a 6-year-old had. The rules of the slide were written nowhere and known by everyone. You waited your turn on the ladder. You did not stop halfway down. And in summer, you tested the metal with your palm first, because a steel slide in August sun could brand the backs of bare legs, and every kid learned to ride down on their own hands, or a piece of wax paper somebody swore made it faster. It did. Boys went down head first when the teacher's back turned. Somebody's little brother always froze at the top, and the line below offered encouragement of a kind. The landing was dirt or asphalt, worn into a hollow by 10,000 sneakers, and you hit it moving. Falls happened and bumps happened, and the general attitude of the age was that gravity was a teacher too. That slide gave kids something real, a fear faced at age 6, a summit, a view of the whole yard from the top. That made you feel 10 feet tall because you were. Modern slides are plastic, low and shaded, and scalded legs are history, which is fair enough. Spinning at the bottom of the same yard was a ride that ran on kid power alone, and it never spun fast enough until it spun too fast. Do you remember hanging on? Number 50. The merry-go-round, not the carnival kind with horses, the playground kind. A flat steel disc with pipe handles, set on a center bearing that howled for oil, powered entirely by children. The big kids grabbed the bars and ran it up to speed, boots digging, and then leapt aboard while the little kids clung to the pipes with both fists and their whole souls. The physics were not negotiable. The faster it spun, the harder the ride tried to throw you, and the only move was to hang on, lean in and holler. Riding it standing up was rank. Riding it leaning out backward was showing off. And letting go was a lesson in tumbling, delivered onto dirt at speed. Every playground had a legend about the time it spun too fast, and most of the legends were at least half true. The merry-go-round was the one ride that took the whole crowd at once. 10 or 12 kids piled on, and it made teamwork out of thrill, pushers and riders trading places by an etiquette nobody wrote down. When it finally coasted to a stop, You stepped off onto solid ground that would not hold still, and staggered like a sailor while your friends howled. Dizziness was the price of admission and part of the product. The old spinners have vanished from most schoolyards, judged too fast and too hard, and the kids who rode them judge that verdict with a smile. Overhead on the same blacktop hung the bars you crossed hand over hand, high enough to matter. Do you remember your first trip all the way across? Number 49. Monkey bars over the blacktop. The monkey bars stood in galvanized dignity over bare asphalt. A ladder laid flat in the sky, and the challenge never changed. Get across, hand over hand without dropping. Your palms learned those bars by heart, cold in the morning, warm by noon. And the skin at the base of your fingers built calluses that tore into flaps the kids called flappers, displayed at lunch like war wounds. Below you was blacktop or gravel or dirt packed hard as a skillet, and everybody knew it, which was the entire point. The bars had a whole culture, skipping bars to show off, crossing backward, sitting on top, which was against the rules at every school in America and done at every school in America. The girls hung by their knees with their dresses tucked, skinning the cat, hair sweeping the ground, and thought nothing of it. Falls came, and arms got broken on playgrounds in those years. An ordinary childhood event that earned you a cast and a week of celebrity while the whole class signed it. Nobody sued anybody. Kids grew strong on those bars in a way that shows in the old photographs. Wiry arms, hard grips, and they grew brave in inches, one bar farther than last week. Rubber matting and lower bars came generations later, trading some scrapes for some safety, an honest trade both directions. When the bell ended recess, the last order of business was the daily draft, 2 captains and a line of hopefuls. Do you remember where you got picked? Number 48, choosing sides for kickball. 2 captains stood facing the crowd, and the oldest ritual on the playground began. 1 potato, 2 potato, or a bat tossed hand over hand to see who picked first. And then the draft, name by name, while every kid not yet chosen did arithmetic in his head about his own worth. Kickball was the game. That big red ball rolled down the dirt path to home plate, and the rules were baseball's rules bent to fit a schoolyard. Pegging a runner with the ball was a legal out, and arguments about safe and out were settled by volume. The kicking itself was pure joy. The run-up, the thump of sneaker on rubber, the ball rising over the shortstop's head while you tore for first base, which was somebody's sweater. But the choosing is what everybody remembers, because the choosing was public and it told the truth. The stars went first and knew they would. The middle kids sweated the middle, and the last kid picked, chosen by default with a captain's shrug, carried that walk to the outfield in his chest. And some men can tell you 60 years later exactly how it felt. The system was honest and it was hard, both at once. And here and there, a captain with something extra in him picked his best friend last on purpose, and the little kid first. And that boy got remembered too. Teachers assign teams now, and the old cruelty is gone, and so is the old glory. Back inside, the room greeted you with a sound like a tea kettle clearing its throat, coming from under the windows. Do you remember the hiss? Number 47, the hissing radiators. Under the classroom windows ran the radiators, ribbed iron painted silver or that institutional tan, and they talked all winter. They hissed, they knocked. They clanked like a man hammering pipe 3 floors down. And when the steam came up on a cold morning, the whole room listened to the building wake up. The janitor fed the boiler in the basement, coal in the older schools. And heat was not a setting on a wall. It was a man's job. The radiators ruled winter life. Wet mittens went on them and filled the room with the smell of steaming wool. The kids seated beside them roasted while the row by the door froze. And desk assignments near the heat were currency. On the worst mornings, you draped yourself over one until the teacher peeled you off. They also branded the careless. That iron got hot enough to hurt, and one touch taught you what your mother's warnings had not. Lunch smells rose from them too, because a sandwich stored close by came out at noon warm and strange, bologna gone soft, cheese gone shiny. The heat itself was moist and heavy, nothing like the dry whisper of forced air, and the windows fogged and frosted in patterns you drew in with a fingernail. Steam heat kept those big brick buildings livable for a century, at the cost of banging pipes and scorched fingers. The man who kept it running knew every kid's name, and he swept the halls with a green compound that had its own perfume. Do you remember him? Number 46. The janitor and his sweeping compound. Every school had one, and he was not staff, he was an institution. The janitor, the custodian, the man with the ring of keys the size of a fist, who stoked the boiler before dawn, shoveled the walks, fixed the desks, and knew the building the way a captain knows his ship. Kids saw him all day, pushing the wide broom down the hall behind a rolling wave of sweeping compound. That green or red sawdust soaked in oil that grabbed the dust and gave every school in America the same smell. Oiled wood floors and something faintly like pine. That smell is the school smell, and if you caught a whiff of it today, you would be 8 years old before your next breath. He was the man you fetched when a kid got sick in the coachroom, and he came without complaint, spread the compound and made it right, which is a kind of daily heroism nobody put on a plaque. The good ones knew every child's name and slipped the patrol boys into the boiler room to warm up on frozen mornings. Kids respected him because their parents did, because in that world every honest job carried its dignity, and a man with keys to the school outranked most of the town in a child's eyes. His work was endless and mostly invisible, which was the point. The building just worked. The floors he oiled gleamed down halls that also led to a small office with an eye chart on the wall. Do you remember covering one eye? Number 45. The school nurse and the eye chart. Her office was a small white room with a cot, a scale, a jar of tongue depressors, and on the far wall the chart. The big E on top, rose shrinking below it, and once a year your whole class lined up in the hall while she called you in one at a time. Cover your left eye with the card. Read the lowest line you can, and you stood on the tape line squinting, and some kids read the bottom row like a billboard, and some kids discovered right there, at age 7, that the world was supposed to have edges on it. The note went home, and a week later a kid came back in glasses and took his ribbing, 4 eyes, and got on with life, usually amazed at what the chalkboard had been saying all year. The nurse did it all. She weighed and measured the whole school, checked scalps when word of lice went around, ran the hearing tests with the headphones and the beeps, painted skinned knees with iodine or that flaming red mercurochrome, and decided with one palm on your forehead whether you were sick or auditioning. Her cot was where you waited for your mother, staring at the ceiling, smelling rubbing alcohol and clean sheets. In many towns, she was the closest thing to a doctor some children regularly saw, and she caught things nobody else was looking for. School nurses now cover multiple buildings and carry files thick with forms. Hers was also the arm that steadied you on the biggest health day the schools ever ran, the day the whole country lined up at once. Do you remember what came on the sugar cube? Number 44. The polio vaccine at school. Your parents' generation feared polio the way people fear fire. Summer epidemics closed the pools, filled the wards with iron lungs, and put braces on kids in every town. So when the Salk vaccine proved out in 1955, church bells rang in some towns to mark the news, and the schools became the front line. Kids lined up in the gym or the cafeteria by the hundred, sleeves rolled, while nurses worked down the line, and mothers volunteered at the tables checking names off lists. Then came the second miracle a few years later, the Sabin oral vaccine, and this one arrived as a sugar cube, a drop of pink or amber medicine on a cube of sugar, handed to you in a little paper cup, and the whole school swallowed its protection like candy. Communities ran Sabin oral Sundays in the early 1960s, whole towns filing through the school in a single day, and children who had watched classmates come back in leg braces took that cube with parents nearly weeping behind them. Kids themselves mostly remember the strange holiday feeling of it. No arithmetic, the gym full of neighbors, the sweet cube melting on the tongue. The campaign worked. Polio collapsed in America within years, one of the great public victories of the century, run substantially through school gymnasiums, and the trust a town placed in them. Fear of a needle was the whole cost for most kids, and the sugar cube erased even that. Order was the school's native language anyway, and it started every time a teacher said the words that moved a whole class like a drill team. Do you remember them? Number 43. Lining up in 2 straight lines. Boys in one line, girls in the other. In most schools by size, shortest to tallest, and quiet meant quiet. Lining up was the school's answer to everything. Line up for the bell, for the cafeteria, for the auditorium, for the fire drill, for dismissal. And a class of 30 could form up in under a minute, because it practiced every day of its life. The teacher stood at the door with a look that required no words, and down the hall you went in formation, hugging the right side, past open doors of other classes who did not look up, because their teacher was watching too. Talking in line was a crime with a going rate. Your name on the board, the end of the line, or the whole class marched back to try it again. And nothing taught the group like the whole class paying for one mouth. Kids policed it themselves after a while, hissing at the talker who was about to cost everybody recess. Straight lines sound small, but they were the visible sign of a larger deal. The school ran on order, and the order made room for 30 kids and one adult to get an amazing amount done in a day. The cost was real too. It was a system with little patience for the wiggler, and the kid who could not hold still wore a path to the office. Schools loosened over the decades, for better in some ways and worse in others, and hallways got louder either way. The lines moved fastest on the mornings, the alarm bell rang, and the whole building emptied on the clock. Do you remember the drill? Number 42, fire drills. The alarm was not a polite tone. It was a bell or a horn that went through your fillings, and the moment it sounded, the whole building executed a play it had rehearsed a dozen times. Books closed, no talking, single file, lights off, door shut, and out the assigned route, down the stairs your class owned, past the janitor holding the big door, into the schoolyard where you formed up by class and stood for the count. The teacher took roll with the grade book she had grabbed on the way out, because grabbing that book was her drill, and the principal walked the lines with a stopwatch. 2 minutes was bragging territory. The rules were absolute, and they were explained in words kids remembered. You do not stop for your coat. You do not go back for anything. And in October, during Fire Prevention Week, a fireman in full turnout gear came to the auditorium and told you why. And no kid who heard those talks ever forgot them, because school fires were not a theory to that generation. The Our Lady of the Angels fire in Chicago in 1958 killed 92 children and 3 nuns, and it changed school fire codes across the whole country. Sprinklers, doors, alarm systems, drills taken dead seriously. So you stood in the cold, in your shirt sleeves, and nobody complained. The drill taught a whole generation that panic is optional, and practice is why. Standing in those lines on a fine fall day, truth be told, was almost pleasant. 10 stolen minutes of sky. The best dressed day of the year, though, came with combed hair, and a cardboard comb to prove it. Do you remember Picture Day? Number 41, Class Picture Day. You knew the date a week out because your mother knew it first. Picture Day meant the good shirt, the plaid dress, hair combed with water, and a promise, and a warning delivered at the door about staying clean until 10 o'clock, which for some boys was asking for the moon. The photographer set up in the gym or the auditorium, umbrella lights and a stool, and classes filed through all morning. You got a black plastic comb, yours to keep, ran it through your hair one last time under the teacher's eye, sat on the stool, turned your shoulders the way the man said, and smiled on command, which produced the entire range of human expression, from angelic to hostage. Then the class assembled on the risers for the group shot. Tall kids in back, teacher at the side. One kid guaranteed to blink. Weeks later, the packet came home, sheets of wallet sizes and one big print, and your mother went through them at the kitchen table, deciding which relatives rated a wallet size this year. Grandmothers got the big one. The pictures cost real money, and in some homes the packet went back unbought, and teachers noticed and sometimes quietly fixed it. Those photographs are the record now. The gap-toothed second grade smile, the cowlick that would not surrender, the class shot with names your generation can still recite row by row. Everything about the ritual survives, but the black comb and the once-a-year weight of it belong to then. At the end of the year, the faces in that photo signed their names in a little book you still might own. Do you remember what they wrote? Number 40, autograph books. The last week of school, a small book came out of desks all over the room, palm-sized, with a padded cover and pastel pages, and it went hand to hand collecting the class. Autographed books were how a school year said goodbye to itself. Your friends signed with the rhymes every kid knew, passed down like playground law. Roses are red, violets are blue. Remember Grant, remember Lee, the heck with them, remember me. Yours till the kitchen sinks, two in a hammock about to kiss. And all of a sudden they went like this, with the words tumbled sideways down the page. The wits of the class labored over their entries. The boy who liked you signed something painfully neutral, and you read it 40 times anyway looking for the hidden message. And the teacher signed last and best, real script, a real sentence about you, the kind of thing you did not know you would keep for 60 years. The books cost little at the dime store and held what mattered, proof in ink of who your people were the year you were 9. Some kids pressed classmates for whole pages. Some got every kid in the room, the janitor and the milkman. The custom thinned out over the decades, crowded out by yearbooks even in the lower grades, and the old rhymes went quiet. Craft Time had its own calendar all year long, and no date on it beat the one in February, when a shoebox became a mailbox. Do you remember cutting the slot? Number 39, the Valentine shoebox. Every February, a shoebox came to school under your arm, wrapped in red construction paper, pasted with doily hearts, with a slot carved in the lid by your father's pocket knife. It sat on your desk like a mailbox, because that is exactly what it was. Valentine's Day in a 1950s classroom ran on little store-bought cards, sheets of them punched apart at the kitchen table, corny puns and cartoon animals. Be mine, you're a peach, signed in pencil, and folded into tiny envelopes with each classmate's name spelled the best you could. Then came the delivery hour, the whole class circling the room dropping cards through slots, and afterward the opening, everybody counting quietly because everybody counted. The kind teachers enforced the all-or-none rule, a card for every child in the class. And that rule was mercy itself, since every room held a kid who would have gone empty without it. Even inside the rule, the reading between lines was ferocious. Which card did she choose for you out of the sheet? The friendly dog or the one with the actual heart on it? And did it mean anything? And you were 9, so yes, it meant everything. The party finished with pink frosted cupcakes from somebody's mother, and those chalky candy hearts with words printed on them. The shoebox went home and stayed on a dresser into spring. Kids still trade Valentines, though the boxes are often store-bought kits now, and something is a little lost when the doilies are. The winter's other great classroom production took weeks of rehearsal and one bedsheet costume. Do you remember your part? Weeks of rehearsal and one bedsheet costume. Do you remember your part? Number 38, the Christmas program. Every December, the school turned itself into a theater. The Christmas program was the biggest night of the school year. Weeks of rehearsal, songs practiced until the words wore smooth, and an auditorium packed with parents in their church clothes holding coats on their laps. The little grades sang with hand motions. The big grades handled the pageant. Shepherds in bathrobes with dish towels on their heads, angels in bedsheets with tinsel halos on coat hanger wire, a Mary chosen by a process that broke hearts, and a doll in a manger of real straw somebody's father hauled in. In public schools of that era, the program mixed carols with jolly old St. Nicholas and Nobody in most towns blinked, a mix that would be sorted out differently in the decades after. What you remember is the feeling, the cafeteria smell replaced by pine, the risers creaking, scanning the dark for your mother and finding her, and the terror and glory of your one line, delivered too fast into the hot lights. Somebody forgot theirs every year, and the audience loved them harder for it. Afterward came cookies in the cafeteria, and walking out into the cold night with your family, still in your costume collar, the whole town's cars pulling out of the lot at once. For teachers, it was a month of unpaid overtime, and they did it every year like clockwork. The show ran on borrowed bathrobes and pure nerve, and so did the classroom's other stage, the one that appeared any Friday a kid had something in a paper sack. Do you remember what you brought? Number 37, show and tell. Friday afternoon, the paper sack came out from under your desk, and for 3 minutes, the front of the room belonged to you. Show and tell was the first public speaking any of you ever did, and the inventory of a 1950s show and tell would stop a museum curator cold. An arrowhead from the creek bed, a shed snakeskin, your father's souvenirs from the war, carried in with a solemnity the room matched, because half the fathers on the block had been there too, and the kids knew it without knowing much. Somebody's turtle in a bowl, a rock that was almost certainly just a rock, presented by a kid who believed in it, and the teacher received it like the Hope Diamond, which is a piece of teaching nobody grades. The rules were listen, hands up for questions, and do not touch without asking. And the questions were the best part, because 7-year-olds interrogate like detectives. Where did you get it? Did it cost money? Does it bite? Stage fright made its first appearance in many lives right there. Knees locked behind the teacher's desk. And so did the discovery that you could survive it, and that people leaning in to hear you is one of life's finer feelings. The kid with nothing to bring learned he could tell instead a story from the weekend, and sometimes that kid turned out to be the best act of the season. Kids still do show and tell here and there. Fewer snakeskins now. The notes that could not wait for Friday traveled a different route, folded small and passed low. Were you ever caught? Number 36, passing notes. The message was written small, folded smaller, and launched into the underground mail system that operated beneath every teacher's nose in America. Passing notes was the texting of the 1950s, and the network was sophisticated. A note could travel 4 rows, hand to hand under desktops, each courier accepting the risk without reading the cargo mostly, and arrive at the girl by the window inside a minute. The folds themselves were a craft. The tight little square, the triangle football, the fancy pinwheel fold the girls did that boys could not open without tearing. Content ranged from the essential, do you like me? Check yes or no, to the operational, meet at the bike rack, to pure editorial about the substitute. The risk made it delicious. A teacher who intercepted a note held absolute power, and the styles varied by teacher, and every kid knew the map. This one dropped it in the wastebasket unread, a mercy. That one read it to herself, and looked at you over her glasses, worse. And the feared ones read it aloud to the room, a punishment so total that the mere threat kept whole grades honest. Getting caught taught operational discipline, better folds, better timing, a lookout. The girl who saved your notes in a cigar box existed, and somewhere one of those boxes still does. Phones replaced all of it, faster and duller, with nothing to fold. Some notes never needed passing, because certain kids had jobs that let them roam the room legally. Watering the plants, wiping the boards. Which job was yours? Number 35. Classroom jobs. The job chart hung by the door, a pocket chart or a wheel with clothespins, and every Monday it dealt out the week's appointments. Blackboard monitor, who washed the boards with a wet rag until they dried streakless slate black. Plant waterer, keeper of the geraniums on the windowsill. Paper passer, wastebasket monitor. Line leader, a title with real power. Flag holder for the pledge. And the plum of plums, office messenger, licensed to walk the empty halls alone, carrying a folded note to the school office, taking the long way past the trophy case both directions. The jobs were unpaid and hotly desired because they were trust made visible. The teacher was saying, in front of everyone, this one is reliable, and a kid who maybe heard too little of that at home stood a little straighter all week with a clothespin on his name. The work was real work too. Boards do not wash themselves, and the eraser dust does not walk to the fire escape. The system taught the plain lesson that a room everybody uses is a room everybody keeps. And that generation carried the habit out of the classroom and into shops and kitchens and army barracks for the rest of their lives. The politics were real as well, and the week the teacher's pet drew line leader again, the electorate noticed. Job charts survive in the lower grades even now. Softer titles, same idea. The messenger's route to the office past the library, where the whole world was filed in one wooden cabinet of little drawers. Do you remember how it smelled? Number 34. The card catalog and the date due stamp. In the middle of the library stood a cabinet of small oak drawers, brass pulls typed labels, and inside it on cards the entire known world. The card catalog filed every book 3 ways: author, title, subject, and the librarian taught you its rituals like rites, fingers walking the cards, the drawer that pulled out 3 feet long and had to be carried flat, the cross-reference that sent you to another drawer across the cabinet. The cards smelled of old paper and pencil lead, and some carried notes in a librarian's perfect hand, from before your parents were born. Finding your book was detective work. Dewey number copied onto scrap paper with a golf pencil. Then the hunt down the shelves, and the number worked, which felt like magic and was actually just order, decades of it. Then the desk. The librarian opened the back cover to the pasted pocket, pulled the card, and stamped the slip with the date due, ka-chunk. A sound so satisfying that kids invented reasons to check out books. 2 weeks. 2 cents a day if you ran late in most towns, and the fine was small but the shame was structural. The system taught you to find things for yourself, to follow a thread from one subject card to the next, and plenty of lifelong readers got made in front of those drawers. Computers retired the catalogs, and the cabinets sell as antiques now, bought by the very kids who once thumbed them. For the kids too far from any library at all, the library came to them, on wheels. Do you remember hearing it pull up? Number 33. The bookmobile. It came down the road like a bus full of treasure, a converted van or truck with shelves bolted along both walls. And when it parked by the school or the corner lot, kids materialized out of every yard. The bookmobile was the library on wheels, and for farm towns, mill villages, and new suburbs that had not built a library yet, it was the only library there was. You climbed the step into a rolling room that smelled of paper and motor oil, shelves rocking gently, and the librarian behind the little desk knew what you read last month, and had set something aside because she thought of you when it came in. That sentence, "I saved this for you," made readers for life. The rules were the library's rules. Quiet voices, 2 weeks, but the geometry was different. Every book within arm's reach, the good ones facing out, and the whole visit timed to the driver's schedule. So choosing had a clock on it, and you learned to choose fast. Rural kids checked out armloads to last until the next stop, and mothers came aboard too, because the bookmobile served whole families, not just school kids. The service ran on county budgets and one librarian's back, hauling crates in every kind of weather, and it delivered the same civilization a marble building delivers, just with tires. Roots thinned out over the decades as branch libraries spread. Whatever you carried home, sooner or later a school report sent you to the heaviest books in the house, the ones sold door to door. Do you remember your family set? Number 32. Encyclopedia reports. The assignment came down, 2 pages on Brazil or volcanoes or Abraham Lincoln, and the whole class went to the same place, the encyclopedia. World Book or Britannica or Funk and Wagnalls. Bought a volume at a time at the grocery store in some families, sold door to door by a man with a sample case in others, and paid off in installments because a full set cost real money. The set lived in the front room like furniture, and it was furniture your parents were proud of. Gold letters on the spines, a statement that this house believed in education. You pulled the volume, B for Brazil, laid it on the rug and copied, let us be honest, closer to the original than any teacher hoped. In your own words, she said, and you changed every third word like a safecracker. And she read the result, knowing exactly which encyclopedia your family owned. The reports got written in pencil, then recopied in ink, with a cover page and a map traced against the window glass. And the tracing was half the grade in your own mind. Families without a set used the libraries, which could not come home, so those kids copied their notes standing up at the reference shelf. The encyclopedia's world was tidy and slightly out of date, and it was still a miracle. The whole world alphabetized within reach of the rug. The internet swallowed it whole. Some knowledge could not be looked up though. Some had to be stood up and said out loud from memory, a whole poem at a time. Do you still know yours? Some had to be stood up and said out loud from memory, a whole poem at a time. Do you still know yours? Number 31. Memorizing and reciting poems. The assignment had no shortcut. Learn it by heart. And heart was the right word. Paul Revere's Ride, or A Psalm or Trees by Joyce Kilmer, or the Gettysburg Address in the upper grades. And you walked around the house for a week muttering lines, tested by your mother while she ironed, until the words stuck. Then came your day. You stood by your desk or walked to the front, hands at your sides, and delivered it to the room, and the room had to sit through all of it, which taught mercy on both ends. Memorization was a pillar of schooling in the 1950s, inherited from a century of schoolrooms before it. And the theory was plain: a furnished mind. Words carried in the head could not be lost, and a man with poems in him was never entirely alone. The practice was equal parts drill and dread. You knew it cold in the kitchen and lost the third stanza under 30 pairs of eyes. And the teacher fed you the line like a stage prompter, and you got through. And getting through was the actual lesson. The critics called it parrot work, and some of it was. But here is the proof that something more happened. Ask anyone from that era and the lines are still there, 70 years on. Whole stanzas surfacing at gravesides and christenings, riding along their whole lives like coins sewn in a coat. Schools mostly dropped it. Music class made its own memories out of thin air, most of them involving a small plastic instrument the whole room played at once. Do you remember the sound? Number 30. The flutophone and the tonette. Music class handed every kid the same weapon, a small plastic wind instrument, black or ivory colored, called a tonette in some schools and a flutophone in others. And then the teacher asked 30 children to play it at the same time. The sound of a whole class working through hot cross buns on those things is a sound no survivor forgets. A sweet, shrill, wandering chorus, some kids a beat behind, one kid always a full song behind, and somewhere in the back, a boy discovering that overblowing produced a shriek that could crack glass. The little instruments were the on-ramp to real music. They cost almost nothing, which mattered, and they taught the actual goods, reading notes off a staff, covering holes with soft fingertips, tonguing each note instead of huffing, breathing in the rests. Band directors used them to scout, watching for the kids with the ear and the discipline, and many a trumpet player and clarinetist started life squeaking through Mary, had a little lamb on a 39-cent tonette. You carried it home in its little sleeve to practice, and your family's opinion of hot cross buns declined nightly, and your dog left the room. The mouthpiece tasted like plastic and pencil shavings, and sharing was unthinkable even then. Recorders took over the same job in later decades. Same idea, same shriek. So this is one memory your grandchildren partly share. The other half of music class needed no instrument at all, just the songbooks coming down the row and the teacher pulling something with strings onto her lap. Do you remember the songs? Number 29. Singing from the songbook with the autoharp. The songbooks came down the rows, hardbound, well-worn, and the teacher called a page number the way a preacher calls a hymn. Music class in the 1950s meant everybody singing, the whole room at once, from books full of folk songs and rounds that the whole country somehow knew. Oh, Susanna, home on the range, she'll be common round the mountain. Erie Canal with its low bridge everybody down. And for accompaniment, the teacher held an autoharp against her chest, pressed the chord bars and strummed. That bright jangling chord, that is the exact sound of an American classroom in 1958. If not the autoharp, then the upright piano in the corner, tuned once a decade, played with more conviction than accuracy. Rounds were the main event. The room split in thirds for row, row, row your boat, and making it all the way through without collapsing into giggles counted as a musical achievement, because it was won. Nobody auditioned. Nobody was told they could not sing. The kid with no pitch sang anyway, planted next to a strong voice, and the blend covered everybody, which is the whole secret of group singing, and maybe a few other things. The songbooks carried the old songs forward one grade at a time, a shared American songbook that generations held in common and could sing at any picnic. Music programs thinned in later decades, and the common songbook scattered. The littlest grades got their music a different way, out of a box of instruments that required no talent at all, only enthusiasm. Do you remember what you got handed? Number 28. The rhythm band. The teacher opened the cabinet and handed out the arsenal. Rhythm sticks, sand blocks, jingle bells on a strap, the triangle with its little steel wand, the wood block, the tambourine, and the crown jewel, the cymbals. Awarded to one child on some system of merit or mercy nobody ever decoded. The rhythm band was how the littlest grades made music, everybody playing at once while the teacher counted, or the record player spun a march. And the result was a joyful, thunderous, approximately rhythmic roar that parents packed the auditorium to hear anyway. There were paper hats sometimes, capes if the budget stretched, and a kid out front with a baton as drum major, promoted to glory. The instruments taught the real foundation. Steady beat, loud and soft, start together, stop together. And stopping together was the hard one. There was always one last clack after the cutoff, and the room laughed, and the teacher started the count again with the patience of a saint. Sand blocks whispered, sticks clicked, and the triangle kid waited 8 measures for his one ting and delivered it like the crack of doom. Every child played something, which was the quiet genius of it. No bench, no cuts, the whole roster on the field. The cost was borne mostly by the teacher's ears. Rhythm bands still show up in kindergartens, though the full parade hat production faded. Upstairs, the big kids were being marched through music of a different kind. In the gym, in sock feet, with a caller on a record telling them to swing their partner. Do you remember your first do-si-do? Number 27. Square dancing in gym class. The record player crackled, a fiddle sawed to life, and a caller's voice filled the gym. Bow to your partner, bow to your corner. And 40 kids in sock feet did both, because square dancing was part of the physical education program in schools across the country, pushed nationally since the 1940s as wholesome American exercise. The setup was engineered for maximum drama. Boys on one wall, girls on the other, and then the pairing, sometimes by count-off, sometimes heaven help you by choice, and the floor between those two walls was the widest space in the known universe. Then the music started and something unexpected happened. It was fun. Do-si-do, promenade, Alaman left, swing your partner. And the swinging got away from some couples, spinning until somebody sat down hard. And the gym teacher called it like a rodeo announcer. Hands were sweaty. Everyone's hands were sweaty. It was the first time many of you touched a hand belonging to the other side of the room, and the caller made it official business, so nobody had to admit anything. The dances taught real things: patterns, timing, courtesy, listening while moving, and they linked town kids to a rural tradition. Their grandparents had danced in barns. Plenty of kids groaned on Square Dance Day, and remember it now with a smile they cannot explain. Gym class had harder days on the calendar too, days involving a rope that went all the way to the ceiling. Did you ever ring the beam? Number 26. Gym uniforms and the rope climb. Gym class had a dress code and a mountain. The dress code was the uniform, white t-shirts and shorts for the boys. And for the girls in many schools, the one-piece gym suit, a snap-front cotton romper in blue or green that no woman of that generation remembers fondly, laundered at home weekly and worn on pain of demerits. Sneakers were canvas, Keds or PF Flyers. Gym shoes kept in a drawstring bag that smelled exactly like you think. And the mountain was the rope, a thick hemp line hanging from the gym ceiling into a shaft of dusty light. And on climbing day, the class lined up under it, and physical truth was administered to all. Some kids walked up that rope like squirrels, feet locking in the way the coach taught, slapping the beam at the top to a roar from below. Some kids got halfway and hung there in private negotiation, and some could not leave the mat in front of everybody, because gym in that era did its testing in public. Rope burns striped the palms and inner knees of the strivers, worn like medals. The coach's philosophy came out of the army half the coaches had served in: laps for lateness, push-ups for lip, and climb it again. It built genuine strength and genuine dread in different children, and sometimes in the same child. The old ropes still hang in some gyms, mostly retired. All of that effort pointed at 1 week on the calendar, when the whole country's gym classes ran the same tests for the same patch. Do you remember chasing it? Number 25. The Presidential Physical Fitness Test. 1 week a year, gym class turned into the Olympics. Pull-ups counted out loud with the whole class watching. Sit-ups with a partner pinning your feet. The shuttle run, chalk erasers snatched off a line. The standing broad jump, the softball throw, the 50-yard dash, and the endless misery of the 600-yard run, which sounds short until you are 10 and it is May. This was the National Fitness Test, born out of a mid-1950s scare when studies suggested American kids were going soft compared to European kids, a finding that landed in Washington like a fire bell in the middle of the Cold War. Eisenhower created a President's Council On youth fitness, in 1956, Kennedy took up the cause with real fervor, wrote about the soft American, and by the 1960s, schools everywhere ran the tests and chased the awards, patches and certificates for the top performers. So your gym teacher had federal backing and used it. The athletes of the class lived for that week and measured their year by one more pull-up. The rest of the class endured it in full view, because scores were public the way everything in that gym was public. And the kid who hung from the bar, unable to manage one pull-up, while the line watched carries that as clearly as the kid who did 12. It got a generation moving, and it sorted children with a cold eye both true. The test evolved over the decades and was finally retired. The gym had kinder nights, though, when the lights went down and a record player did the work. Do you remember your first sock hop? Number 24. The sock hop. The gym that smelled of floor wax and dodgeball turned, for one Friday night, into a ballroom. Crepe paper streamers. A record player on the stage with a parent or the young teacher spinning 45s. And everyone in socks, because street shoes would scuff the precious gym floor, which is where the name came from. The records were the new sound. Elvis, Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry, the Everly Brothers. And the sight of kids doing the bop and the stroll in white socks under gym lights is about as 1950s as America ever got. The physics of the room never changed. Boys along one wall in ducktails and nerves, girls along the other in poodle skirts and saddle shoes. And the walk across that floor to ask for a dance was the longest journey of a young life, performed under full spectator conditions. A fast song was safe, everybody in a crowd. A slow song was the whole ballgame, hands placed carefully, chaperones circulating with a practiced eye, and a ruler's worth of daylight enforced between partners. Punch and cookies stood on a cafeteria table. The last song ended too soon always, and you walked home replaying one 3-minute dance for a week. The Hops raised money for the class trip and gave rock and roll its first dance floor in 1,000 towns, with the school's reluctant blessing. School dances survive, of course, louder and darker. The socks and the 45 stayed behind. The older kids at those hops carried another badge of their standing, a ruler-shaped instrument that ran on brains instead of batteries. Do you remember learning to slide it? Number 23, the slide rule. It hung from the belts of the serious boys and lived in the desks of future engineers. A ruler-shaped instrument of bamboo or metal with a sliding center strip and a glass cursor, and it did the math that built the age. The slide rule was how high schoolers of the late 1950s and 1960s multiplied, divided, and worked roots and logarithms. No batteries, no display, just scales and a trained eye. Learning it was a course in itself. See scale against D scale, line up the one, read the answer under the hairline, and keep track of the decimal point in your head, because the rule gave you the digits and left the magnitude to your character. A good one, a Kufel, an Esser, or a Pickett, came in a leather holster and cost enough that fathers handed theirs down. The boys in the science club could race one another and did. And in the Sputnik years, after 1957 lit a fire under American math and science teaching. The slide rule became almost a patriotic instrument, the tool of the boys and the handful of girls who were going to catch the Russians. Its limits taught a discipline calculators never did. 3 digits of accuracy, know your approximations, estimate first so the machine cannot fool you. The engineers who worked the space program carried them, and that is as far as the ruler-shaped computer ever needed to boast. Handheld calculators arrived in the 1970s and ended it almost overnight. Down the hall from the slide rule crowd, another room clattered like a rainstorm on a tin roof, 30 machines at once. Can you still hear the bell at the end of each line? Number 22, typing class on manual typewriters. The room announced itself from down the hall, a rolling clatter like hail, punctuated by dings. Typing class ran on rows of manual machines, Royals, Underwoods, Remingtons, heavy as anvils, and the teacher up front called the drills in cadence. SDF, JKL semicolon, eyes on the chart, not on your hands. And to enforce that last rule, some rooms had blank keycaps or a cardboard shield over the keyboard. So your fingers learned in the dark. The machines demanded muscle. Every letter was a firm strike. A weak little tap printed a ghost, and the small fingers earned their keep on A and the semicolon. At the end of each line, the bell rang, and you slapped the carriage return lever. That great ratcheting sweep, 30 carriages flying in loose formation. Speed tests were the drama. 1 minute, fingers blazing, and errors subtracted from your words per minute. So the reckless typist finished fast and scored slow. A lesson about life smuggled in as clerical training. Mistakes cost real labor in the days before correction fluid was common. Backspace. Line it up. Erase with a gritty wheel eraser that could scrub a hole clean through the page. The class was mostly girls by the custom of the era, aimed at office jobs, and the boys who took it anyway lucked into the single, most useful skill the school offered, as every one of them discovered decades later in front of a computer. Down the hall in the same wing, the building split by custom into 2 rooms, one smelling of sawdust and one of dinner. Which door did you walk through? Number 21, Home Ec and Shop class. By junior high, the school sorted you at the door. Girls to home economics, boys to shop, and almost nobody crossed over, because that was the map of the era. Home Ec was a working kitchen and a row of sewing machines, and the girls learned white sauce, muffins, a balanced plate, how to read a pattern, thread a singer, and turn out an apron or a gathered skirt they actually wore. There were graded units on setting a table and planning a family budget, because the course was openly training future homemakers, and the teachers took it seriously as a profession, which in their hands it was. Shop was the kingdom of sawdust, and the boys learned the real names of tools, how to square a board, drive a nail without bending it, read a rule to the 16th, and respect a table saw the way you respect a loaded gun, a speech every shop teacher delivered with a missing finger's worth of authority somewhere in the building backing him up. Home came a bookshelf, a lamp with a cord the boy wired himself, a pipe stand for a father who did not smoke a pipe, treasured anyway. Both rooms taught the same secret lesson, that your hands could make useful things, and the confidence took root for life. The sorting itself was the flaw. Plenty of girls wanted the saw, and plenty of boys needed the skillet. And later decades finally mixed the rooms and then, sadly, mostly closed them. Some afternoons the whole schedule stopped cold, though, because a television rolled in on a tall cart and history was on it. Do you remember counting down to a launch? Number 20. Watching the space launches on a rolled-in TV. The AV cart came through the door with the big television strapped on top, rabbit ears wagging, and the class knew the morning was saved and history was scheduled. When America launched a man, school stopped. Alan Shepard in 1961, John Glenn's orbits in 1962, the Gemini flights after, and the whole class sat in rows watching a gray rocket steam on a gray pad, while Walter Cronkite's voice filled the room, the countdown holding, the teacher fiddling the antenna. Some kid ordered to hold still exactly where he stood because the picture was best that way. Then the count, called out loud by 30 kids, 10, 9, 8, and the long fire and the slow rise, and cheering in classrooms from coast to coast. Teachers wheeled those sets in because they understood, correctly, that no lesson plan could compete with the actual future lifting off live. The space race had already changed your schooling anyway. Sputnik in 1957 scared the country into pouring money and urgency into math and science. And now the payoff flew overhead, 100 miles up while you watched. Kids drew rockets in the margins for weeks. Everybody knew the astronauts' names the way they knew ball players. The waiting was most of it. Holds and delays and the picture rolling. And nobody minded because the waiting was the lesson too. Big things take patience. Kids today watch launches on a phone if they watch at all. The same loudspeaker that announced assembly days carried other news too. And one November afternoon, it carried the worst any of you ever heard at school. Do you remember where you were sitting? Number 19. The loudspeaker in November 1963. Every classroom had a speaker high on the wall, a wooden or metal box that carried the principal's morning announcements, lunch menus, bus changes, the ordinary traffic of a school day. And then came the Friday afternoon, November 22, 1963, When that box crackled on at the wrong time of day, and nothing about school was ever quite the same. In some schools, the principal spoke. In others, the office piped in the radio, and the class sat listening to a newsman's voice say that the president had been shot in Dallas. And then, a little later, that he was gone. If you were at a desk that day, you remember it in photographs. The teacher's face, the girl who started to cry first. Teachers who had steadied children through fire drills and worse stood at the front of rooms with no idea what to say. And some of them wept. And seeing that undid the kids more than the news itself, because teachers did not cry. Schools let out early in many towns. You walked home through streets gone strange and quiet, flags already coming down to half-staff, and found your mother at the television, where the whole country stayed for 4 days. Every generation gets a where were you moment, and for school kids of that era, this was it, and it arrived through the same tin speaker that usually announced fish sticks. The speaker fell silent. The weekend swallowed the country. Some news traveled the other direction in October, smuggled into class in a shirt pocket with an earphone. Do you remember the World Series sneaking in? Number 18. Transistor radios and the World Series. The World Series played in daylight in those years. Every game an afternoon game, which put October's biggest event squarely inside the school day. And the boys of America responded with espionage. A transistor radio, the pocket-sized miracle that got cheap in the late 1950s, came to school in a shirt pocket or a jacket, with a single earphone on a wire threaded down a sleeve or up through a collar, and a boy would sit through geography with his chin propped on his hand, palm covering the earpiece, wearing the blank face of a spy. The score moved through the room in whispers and finger signals, relayed desk to desk like the Note Network, and by the time it reached the far row, the runner on second had sometimes scored twice. Teachers knew. Of course they knew, half of them wanted the score themselves, and the responses ranged by temperament. Some confiscated radios into the desk drawer until June, some pretended blindness, and the beloved ones surrendered entirely, brought in a radio, and let the class listen to an inning with the arithmetic books open for cover. And those teachers are remembered by name to this day. The transistor itself was freedom in a plastic case. The first piece of media a kid ever owned outright. Ball games under the covers, rock and roll on the walk home. Night games took the series out of school hours in later decades and ended the whole cat and mouse forever. The dress those spies wore to school was itself regulated, and not lightly. Do you remember what the code allowed? Number 17. The school dress code. Girls wore dresses or skirts, full stop. In most public schools through the 1950s and well into the 1960s, that was the rule in writing or in iron custom, and it held in January, when girls walked to school through snow with bare knees, snow pants pulled on under the skirt for the walk and peeled off in the cloakroom. Slacks on a girl at school were a scandal, and the day a district finally allowed them. Mothers and daughters both remember the year it happened. Boys had their own code, trousers. No dungarees in many towns because jeans meant trouble in the era's mind. Shirts tucked, belts worn and hair off the collar, a line that would turn into open warfare by the late 1960s when the Beatles arrived, and sideburns in length became a cause worth a suspension. Teachers enforced hems and haircuts along with homework. A girl could be sent home for a skirt that failed the Neal test, fabric touching the floor when she knelt, measured in front of others, and that memory did not age well for anyone. The code's defenders said it taught respect and kept the mind on lessons, and there is a photograph's worth of truth in it. Those class pictures do look sharp. The cost was comfort and freedom, paid mostly by the girls, and the courts and the culture rewrote the rules within a decade. Under those hemlines, on every pair of feet in the room, sat the era's own footwear, polished by hand on Sunday night. Which kind did you wear? Number 16. Saddle shoes and penny loafers. Look down in any class photo from the era and the floor tells the story. Saddle shoes, white leather with the black or brown band across the middle, on girls and plenty of boys in the younger grades, worn with folded down bobby socks. And penny loafers, the slip-on with the little leather slot across the top, into which you pressed an actual penny, one in each shoe, heads up for luck in some playgrounds, and in others the pennies were dime store philosophy, emergency phone money, since a pay phone call cost a dime, and 2 loafers carried 2 cents toward it, which tells you the plan was never really the phone. Shoes were bought to last the year, fitted big with growing room at the start of September, stuffed with tissue until your foot caught up. Keeping the white part of a saddle shoe white was a losing war fought weekly with polish at the kitchen table, because shoe care was a taught skill. Newspapers spread, brushes and rags, your father supervising the shine like an inspection. Sneakers were for gym, canvas keds and PF flyers, and wearing them all day would have struck your mother as answering the door in pajamas. Hard leather soles made the school's wooden floors ring, a whole hallway clicking like typewriters, and slick soles turned every polished corridor into a skating rink the boys used accordingly. Loafers survive, saddles come and go as costume. Getting those shoes through winter took armor though, and the armor waited by the door with a row of maddening buckles. Do you remember fighting yours on? Number 15. Galoshes with the metal buckles. They stood in a row by the kitchen door all winter, black rubber overshoes with a ladder of metal buckles up the front, and you did not leave for school without them. Galoshes went on over your regular shoes, which was the entire fight. Jamming a leather Oxford into a rubber boot one size too generous, hopping on one foot, and then the buckles, 4 or 5 spring steel clasps that pinched cold fingers and never all closed on the first try. Boys wore them defiantly unbuckled, flapping and jingling down the sidewalk like loose tack, a small rebellion mothers lost daily. The name itself belongs to the era, galoshes, rubbers, overshoes, arctics, depending on your town and your grandmother. At school they came off in the cloakroom, 30 pairs dripping in a black rubber herd, and finding your own at 3 o'clock was archaeology, since they were all identical, which is why your mother painted your initials inside the top in nail polish. The system worked. Leather shoes survived winters, feet stayed dry through slush that would swamp a sneaker, and 1 pair of school shoes made it to June, which was the household economics under the whole ritual. The smell of wet rubber warming by the radiator is a smell your generation could identify blindfolded. The misery was real too, the pinched fingers, the boot that ate the shoe and would not give it back. Snow boots that replaced street shoes ended the whole wrestling match. Above the collar, meanwhile, the era kept its own strict order, applied at home with clippers and a jar of orange goop. Do you remember the smell of it? Number 14. Home haircuts and butch wax. Haircut night happened in the kitchen. A chair on spread newspapers, a towel around your neck clothespin in back, and your father or an uncle running the hand clippers, or the new electric set from the Sears catalog, which came with attachments and ambitions. The standard issue for boys was short, the crew cut, the butch, the flat top for the fortunate, and the flat top required product, butch wax, an orange stick of stiff pomade that smelled vaguely of citrus and machine shop, dragged across the front bristles to make them stand at attention like a brush. Barbershop trips happened too. Saturday mornings, comic books in the rack, the striped pole turning, 4 bits and a lollipop. But plenty of families cut hair at home, because a house full of boys at barbershop prices was a budget line, and mothers trimmed the girls' bangs at the same kitchen station. Scotch tape across the forehead as a cutting guide, with results the class pictures preserve forever. Pin curls and home permanents. Tony Kitts sharp with ammonia handled the girls' side of picture week. The clippers pulled when the blades dulled, and every man of that generation can still feel that exact pinch at the back of his neck. Hair was order in those years, checked at the classroom door along with fingernails in some rooms. Then the 1960s arrived over the collar, and the kitchen chair lost its authority one boy at a time. All of it, the wax, the shoes, the tablets, came from one store downtown with a counter for everything. Do you remember shopping its aisles in late August? Number 13. The 5 and dime school supply trip. One late August afternoon, your mother took the list and you took her hand, and you walked the aisles of the 5 and dime, Woolworths, Crest's, Ben Franklin, whichever one anchored your main street, under ceiling fans and hanging signs, past the lunch counter smell of grilled cheese and coffee, to the back-to-school tables. There it all was in open bins, Big Chief tablets in a stack, Yellow pencils by the bin, a penny a piece or a box for a dime. Pink pearl erasers, rulers, paste. A pencil box with a sliding lid if the year's budget smiled. Crayons in the 8 and the 24. And gleaming above your station, the 64. The list from school was short and exact, and your mother worked it with coins counted from an envelope, because September cost money, shoes and coats and supplies all at once, and the 5 and dime existed precisely so that a family could outfit a child for pocket change. You lobbied. Every kid lobbied for the bigger crayon box, for the pencil box with the compass in it, and you won some years, and lost others, and remember both. The paper sack, they gave you a small and weighed nothing, and you carried it home like treasure. And the night before school you arranged it all on your dresser, in a private ceremony. Half the country was performing at the same hour. The dime stores faded out decades ago, lunch counters and all. Hauling those supplies took no backpack, because backpacks did not exist for school books. Do you remember how you carried yours? Number 12. The book strap in the arm load. Nobody wore a backpack to school because school backpacks were not a thing yet. Books traveled in your arms or cinched in a book strap. A leather or web belt with a buckle that bound the stack tight, swung at your side by the loop or slung over a shoulder. And in a pinch, your father's old army belt did the job. The carrying itself had a grammar everyone read without thinking. Boys carried books at their side in one hand, low and careless, and would have sooner gone barefoot than hugged them. Girls carried them hugged to the chest, both arms chin high. Nobody decreed it, everybody obeyed it, and the one exception in every school was noted daily. Then there was the maneuver the whole custom existed for, the boy who offered to carry a girl's books home. That offer was a public declaration with witnesses, and accepting it was an answer. And entire romances of the era began and ended in the transfer of an armload of textbooks on a sidewalk. The strap had its failures, a buckle let go on the run, and your books fanned into a puddle, homework and all. And the strap doubled as a weapon in hallway skirmishes, until a teacher ended that. Bad weather meant a rubber band around your papers and a run for it. Backpacks swept in during the 1970s and solved the whole problem while quietly deleting one of romance's easiest opening moves. The walk home with that armload had one mandatory stop anyway, a screen door with a bell on it and a counter of glass jars. Do you remember what a penny bought? Number 11. The candy store on the walk home. Between school and home stood the checkpoint, the corner store, the candy store, the little grocery with the screen door that banged and a bell that announced you, and behind the counter, glass jars and open boxes of penny candy, presided over by an owner who knew every kid in the neighborhood by name and by credit risk. A penny was real money in there. Bazooka gum with the comic, Mary Jane's BB Bats kits, root beer barrels, red hot dollars, wax bottles with the syrup inside, candy buttons on paper strips that came off with paper still attached, and you ate it anyway. 2 cents opened the licorice question. A nickel bought a candy bar of adult dimensions or a bottle of pop from the cooler, cap pried on the opener screwed to the wall. The buying was the ceremony, a small brown bag. Your selections called out one at a time while the owner's patience held. This one, no wait, that one. And the arithmetic done out loud was the best math class of the day. Kids swept porches and returned pop bottles for deposit money, 2 cents a bottle, to fund the habit, which made the candy store the neighborhood's first economy of labor. Mothers said it would spoil your supper, and it did, and the system continued. The corner stores thinned out as the decades ran, and penny candy outlived the penny's worth. In September, that same walk home carried a different cargo, stiff and new and squeaking with every step. Do you remember breaking in your school shoes? Number 10. New school shoes in September. Once a year, right before Labor Day, came the shoe store trip, and it was serious business. The whole family went sometimes, and the salesman, a professional in a tie, measured your foot in the metal Brannock device, pressed his thumb to find your toe, and brought out boxes from the mysterious back room. You got one pair of school shoes to last the year, bought a half size big for growing room, sturdy leather Oxfords or saddles, chosen by your mother on the twin stars of durability and price, with your opinion received and mostly overruled. Some stores in the era ran the shoe-fitting fluoroscope, the X-ray box where you wiggled green skeleton toes while the machine hummed, a marvel of the age that the age later thought better of and quietly removed. Then the wearing began. New leather squeaked with every step, announced you into every room, and the whole first week of school squeaked in chorus. Blisters happened, heels rubbed raw, band-aids applied, and your mother said they just need breaking in. And she was right. And by October the shoes and your feet had negotiated a peace that held until spring, when your toes reached the end of the growing room ahead of schedule, and you said nothing, because you knew what shoes cost. Polishing on Sunday night kept them respectable. Kids now own more pairs than closets hold. That first squeaking morning came wrapped in a smell the school saved all summer just for you. Can you still breathe it in? Number 9. The first day of school smell. You walked through the big doors on the first morning of September, and it hit you before you saw a single face. The smell. Fresh floor wax over oiled wood, laid down by the janitor in the empty August weeks, mixed with chalk dust, new paint on the radiators, paste, pencil shavings, and the particular perfume of a brand new box of crayons somewhere in the building. Every school in America smelled like that on opening day, and the smell did something to your stomach that was equal parts dread and Christmas Eve. The building itself gleamed like it never would again. Floors buffed to a mirror down the long hall, boards washed to pure black, the alphabet stripped crisp above them, and your new room waiting with your name already printed on a tag on a desk, which meant somebody had been thinking about you all summer. You wore the new shoes, still squeaking, and the new shirt, and carried the dime store supplies, and the whole population of the school arrived scrubbed and combed, and slightly taller, taking inventory of one another, who grew, who moved away, who got glasses, whose class you landed in, which you had known for a week from the list taped to the school's front door. Another vanished ritual, the whole neighborhood crowding the steps to read the rosters. First days still happen, and children still feel it, but that exact smell, wax and chalk and crayons together, retired with the buildings that made it. The other end of the year had its own perfume, cut grass and cinders. On the one day school moved entirely outdoors. Do you remember the ribbons? Number 8. Field Day. On a morning in late May, the whole school walked out the doors and did not come back in. Field Day. The playground and the ball field sprouted chalk lanes and finished strings. Fathers' folding chairs lined the fences. And the entire student body, first grade to 6th, spent the day running, jumping, and hollering itself hoarse. The events were the classics, and no committee has improved on them since. The 50-yard dash, heats by grade. The sack race in burlap feed sacks that smelled of the farm they came from. The three-legged race, an experiment in cooperation that mostly proved the opposite. The egg and spoon walk, the wheelbarrow race, and the day's main event, the tug of war, class against class across a line of lime, with the rope hairy enough to leave your palms burning, and the losing side dragged sliding through the grass to a roar you can still hear. Winners got ribbons, blue, red, white, pinned right on your shirt, and a kid who was nothing special at arithmetic could be a champion by lunch, which was the whole quiet point of the day. Mothers came with jugs of Kool-Aid and cookies by the 100. Teachers ran the stopwatches with whistles on lanyards, sunburned and happy. Somebody skinned something. Iodine was applied, the day rolled on. It cost the school a bag of lime and some ribbon, and bought a memory 70 years long. The end of that same week usually brought the classroom's own farewell feast, cupcakes on waxed paper and a red drink in paper cups. Do you remember the last day party? Number 7. The class party. On party days, the last afternoon before Christmas break or the last week of school, the arithmetic books closed early, and the mothers arrived. Room mothers, they were called, an official title in the era's order of things, and they came through the door with cake pans and pitchers, and the desks got pushed into a horseshoe, and school lawlessness broke out at the level of a second helping. The menu never varied and never needed to. Cupcakes baked at home, chocolate or white with a candy on top, frosting applied thick by hands that made supper for 6 every night. Kool-Aid red, always somehow red, mixed in a glass jug and poured into paper cups small enough to guarantee thirds. Candy corn in fall, conversation hearts in February, candy canes in December, and on the finest occasions, the freezer chest Dixie cups with the wooden spoons. There were games run by the room mothers, pin the tail, musical chairs to a record, a spelling relay if the teacher could not fully let go, and prizes of pencils and jacks. The teacher, off duty in her own room, laughed at things, which the class filed away as evidence she was human. Room mothers were the school's unpaid infantry all year. Parties, field trips, picture day, and the whole system ran on their station wagons and sheet cakes. The party ended with the janitor's push broom and crumbs in the desks for June to find. One party a year outranked it though, the one where you walked out the door carrying everything you owned. Do you remember the very last day? Number 6. The last day of school. The last day barely counted as school, and everybody, including the teacher, knew it. Desks got emptied into paper sacks, a year's sediment hauled out into the light, dried up paste, a lost mitten from January 40 drawings, the ruler you thought Gerald stole. You washed your own desk with a wet rag, scraped your own gum, no comment, and stacked the textbook's front and center for the teacher's inspection, hoping the grocery bag cover had done its duty, because a damaged book meant your family got a bill. The room came down around you all morning, borders off the boards, alphabet strip rolled up, geraniums sent home with the plant monitor, until the walls stood bare as September. Report cards came last, the final one, with the line that mattered more than all the grades combined. Promoted to grade 4, and the teacher shook each kid's hand or pressed a shoulder at the door, and some of you hugged her, and some of you wished now you had. Then the bell, the last bell, and the doors burst open, and the whole school poured down the steps yelling into the summer. No school, shirt tails out. A mob of pure joy scattering toward 3 months that stretched ahead the way only childhood summers did, endless from the front porch. The walk home took twice as long and weighed nothing. Somewhere in the sack under your arm rode the year's trophies, and the best of them was a single sheet of paper with a gold star stuck at the top. Do you remember where your mother put it? Number 5. The gold star paper on the refrigerator. It was just a spelling test or an arithmetic page, 10 problems in pencil. But across the top, in red, the teacher had written 100, and next to it she had pressed a gold star, a small foil star from the little box in her desk drawer, licked or moistened on a sponge, and fixed to your paper like a medal on a chest. And it worked exactly like a medal. You carried that page home flat, protected between books, and presented it in the kitchen, and your mother read it and said what she said. And then came the coronation. The paper went up onto the refrigerator door under a magnet, or tucked into the frame of the hallway mirror, or pinned to the kitchen corkboard. Whatever the house's gallery was, in full view of everyone who came through. And your father saw it when he came in from work without you having to say a word, which was the entire art of the thing. Teachers of the era ran on stars, gold for best, silver and red and blue in their ranks below. Star charts on the wall tracking books read, and tables mastered. And the system was cheap and public, and it moved children, sometimes more than was fair to the kid whose row stayed bare. But the paper on the refrigerator was different from the chart. That one was family business. It said, in this house, work gets noticed. Some of those pages survive today in mother's keepsake boxes, which tells you who treasured them most. The star said you did well. The voice that read to you after lunch gave you something even better. Do you remember the story? Number 4. The teacher reading aloud after lunch. Right after lunch, when the room was full of fidgets and fish stick fumes, the teacher did the wisest thing in her whole bag. She picked up the book, heads down on desks if you wanted, lights sometimes off, and she read aloud, 1 chapter a day. And 30 wound-up children went still, as the classroom filled with somewhere else. Charlotte's Web, new in 1952, and passed teacher to teacher like news of gold. Old Yeller after 1956. The Boxcar Children, Homer Price, Little House on the Prairie. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory brand, new in 1964. She did the voices, or she did not need to, and when the chapter ended at the worst possible cliff, the room groaned as one animal. One more, please, one more. And she closed the book smiling, because the groan was the point, and tomorrow's stillness was already bought. For some kids, this was the discovery of their lives, that a book could do that, and they went to the library and found the same book and read ahead, then kept the secret honorably. For the kid who struggled with reading, This was the 1 hour reading asked nothing of him and gave him everything, the whole story free. And the day Charlotte died in that doorway, the teacher's voice went thin, and nobody laughed at anybody's wet eyes, hers included. Teachers still read aloud where the schedule allows it. The clock above her head ticked through every chapter, and its final act each day was the slowest show in town. Do you remember watching that minute hand? Number 3. Watching the clock's last 5 minutes. Every classroom had one, high on the wall above the door or the boards. A big round electric clock with a white face, black numbers, and a red second hand, wired to the master clock in the office, so the whole building agreed on the time. And every kid in that building had a doctorate in reading it. You knew its tricks. You knew the minute hand on many of those school clocks did not glide. It waited, gathering itself, and then jumped a full minute at once with a soft click-thunk. And you learned to watch for the jump the way a fisherman watches a bobber. The last 5 minutes of the day were the longest 5 minutes science has ever produced. Books were quietly squared on desks, feet found the floor. The teacher, who had spent 30 years pretending not to notice the room leaned toward the door, kept teaching to the bitter end on principle. And the clock jumped and refused to jump. And somewhere a kid swore the thing moved backward, and he had witnesses. Time itself behaved differently in that room. An hour of arithmetic outlasted a Saturday, and the same clock that crawled all afternoon spun like a fan through Friday art class. Which was your first lesson in a truth the rest of life kept teaching? Then the hand hit the mark, the bell rang, and the room detonated. That watched clock measured out something you could not see from your desk. 6 years of your one childhood, tick by jump. And through those years, 1 seat away, sat the person who made all that time worth it. Who was yours? Number 2, your best friend from grade school. There was one. Say the name to yourself right now because you can. The kid from your row or your block who was plainly yours. Assigned by geography and sealed by everything after. You walked to school together, matched steps without trying, traded sandwiches by standing treaty, defended each other in the kickball draft, and wore a path between 2 back doors that neither mother ever needed knocked on. You knew things about each other nobody has known since. The dog's name, the sound of his mother calling him in, which step on her porch was loose, what he was afraid of, told once at dusk on the curb and never used against him. The friendship ran on nothing, on baseball cards and jacks and long afternoons with no plan, and it was rich beyond anything money touched. Best friends got separated into different classrooms some Septembers, a genuine grief the adults called good for you, and survived it, and found each other at recess anyway. Then time did what time does. A family moved for work, a father's transfer, and you stood in the street while the car pulled away, and you wrote letters for a while in your best Palmer hand, and the letters slowed, and 60 years happened. Here is what did not happen. You did not forget. The face is still there, 10 years old forever, and a certain slant of September light can put you both back on that sidewalk in half a second. Some of you found each other again late in life, at reunions, at funerals, and shook hands and were 10 again. One person from those years reached even deeper than that friend did, and stood at the front of the room to do it. Do you already know who is waiting at number 1? Number 1, the teacher you never forgot. Close your eyes and she is standing there, or he is, at the board, chalk in hand, in the dress or the jacket and tie they seem to have been born wearing, and you can hear the voice, the exact voice saying your name. Out of all the teachers of all those years, there was one, the one who caught you being smarter than you thought you were and said so, out loud in front of the class, and something in you stood up straighter and never fully sat back down. The one who kept you after not for punishment, but to say, quietly, you could really be something, when nobody at home was saying it. The one who slipped a book onto your desk and said, try this. And it was the right book, and it turned out to be a door. They taught for pay that everyone agreed was too little, in rooms of 30 and more. And they saw everything, the kid whose lunch was thin, the kid whose home was loud, the kid hiding behind a joke. And they did what they could with what they had, which was mostly themselves. They knew your handwriting, your excuses, your parents, and your worth, sometimes in that order. And the ones we mean, the ones this entry is for, they knew something teachers are never told, that a sentence said to a 9-year-old can still be holding a 75-year-old up. Most of them are gone now. Few of us ever went back to say it. So say it here. Put that teacher's name in the comments, the school, the town, the year, and what they said to you. Because somewhere another kid from that room is scrolling, and your comment will hand them their childhood back. And while you are down there, share the memory of yours that hit you hardest today. If this walk back felt like home, tap that like button, subscribe, and settle